This story begins on a sunny summer day in a small village. The girl Sian went to the street next to the house of an old man who was the village chief. The old man was a kind person and received the girl with great courtesy. She immediately handed him a sheet with the receipt on which he refuses to accept her father's fee this month. Sian wrote that request herself and fervently begged the village chief to have mercy, and on this occasion not to charge money from her dad. At first he refused, as the girl's father had already promised to donate money, so it was unlikely he could change anything. But Sian, with Shrek the cat's look, asked him to make an exception, as it was the first time in the year she had requested to cancel the fee. The chief's kind heart did not allow him to dismiss the visitor indifferently, and he agreed, but only once and forever. Happy, Sian returned home, practically skipping with joy. After all, under the charm of her adorable little face, no one could resist, and her mission was considered accomplished. Her dad's kindness seemed to be the cause of all evils, and she still couldn't believe he had decided to donate such a large sum to the village. According to her, it was better to buy land with that money, hire workers, and both go on vacation together. But even so, Sian loved her dad very much. It's just that now she had to watch him more closely. On the way, she met acquaintances who praised her beautiful dress, and the girl boasted that her dad had sewn it for her. Sian was very pretty. Her eyes shone like two dewdrops on a pure summer meadow. Her pink hair was so soft it looked like cotton candy and highlighted her round, apple-like cheeks. And the world she lived in was actually a romance she had just begun to read, titled Melody's Life. It is a fantasy story about the adventures of the holy Melody. But Sian in this world was neither a saint nor even a princess. She ended up in the body of a normal girl who lived with her kind father in a quiet village forgotten by God. At first, she didn't feel comfortable in her new form, but over time she got used to it, and she became more integrated into the daily life of that world. Those who gave her a new life simply limited her abilities at the beginning to control her. She spoke like a child, although she was no longer one, but she liked that life. Today, a meat dish was even planned for dinner, and Sian hoped her father would come home early. However, a child's body got tired quickly, and after walking, she got sleepy. But as soon as Sian approached the house, after crossing the fences, several knights approached her. First, one of them, probably the leader of the group, asked if there were any adults in the house. Then he explained that they were looking for a man with red eyes and black hair. The girl found these characters very suspicious and immediately replied that there was no one with those characteristics there. In reality, this is what her father looked like, who to her was the kindest person in the world. He is the most sincere and hardworking, and helped others in the same fields all day long. But because of his kindness, they deceived him with money, as he always assumed other people's debts. Sian's father probably got into quite a big problem, as they sent a whole group, and the girl started thinking about how to convince these people to leave. The chief knight clarified that they were informed about the location of the wanted person and must verify. But Sian scrunched up her face like a child and said she didn't know anything, besides calling the uncles very scary. Her fake fear didn't work. The knights remained standing with serious faces. She used her childish charm, murmuring funny things, and so the knights in helmets could not resist. Of course she praised them, calling them very strong, and her flattery trapped them. They were already ready to turn away, realizing they wouldn't find what they were looking for, while Sian celebrated in silence. But she decided to ask her father later what he had gotten himself into and carefully plan how to protect him. And even if the father is involved in something, she does not intend to back down. When the knights were leaving, the girl heard a familiar voice and immediately turned around. It was her father, who appeared at an inopportune moment, but he didn't know how to warn her not to approach there. He started waving his hands randomly, indicating that there were suspicious types nearby, and that they should wait for them to leave. The father didn't understand, but as he got closer, he saw strangers in armor and immediately grabbed his daughter so they wouldn't hurt her. She barely breathed in his arms, but Sian kept thinking that she would punish those guys with her burning fist if a finger touched her dad. Suddenly, that leading knight bowed before her father and stated that he had come to deliver a message to the first heir of Miamord, Matthias. The message said that he should stop playing games and come back. Upon hearing the word Miamord, Sian was disconcerted, as it boded no good. The family of the Dukes of Miamord is the most notorious lineage in the empire. Their duchy is a place where the most terrible crimes, even murder, are committed without hesitation. The girl didn't understand how her father could be related to Miamord, and thought those guys were terribly mistaken. Sian expected her dad to oppose the knights, but suddenly begged them to convey that he would arrive soon. The girl remembered the sad end of that story, when the emperor ordered everyone sent to the scaffold, and the impious demons of Mermord were ordered to have their heads cut off in honor of the imperial family. Their properties were burned to the ground, and the emperor announced ominously the end of the Mermord family. Sian felt a little sad, recalling the sad end of that lineage. Despite being the family of the main villains, whom everyone hated and feared, even within the lineage, the struggle for power never ceased. Daily reports about other people's deaths during breakfast were part of their routine. But now Sian had to travel with her father to the fortress of those horrible relatives. Seeing it from afar sent chills down the girl's spine. Although her father felt perfectly fine and even asked if his daughter was dizzy during the trip, Sian wasn't nauseous. She was just very worried that the character Matthias wouldn't be in the novel. And considering her father's kindness, he could be the one they just killed before the story starts. Sian's dad doesn't fit this family at all, and she thought they forced him to return after his voluntary exile in the village, since he is not one of those who carry on a subterranean war for the throne. On the contrary, he would rather hand over power to someone else. And since they had arrived here, the villains would surely start hunting him. These thoughts tormented her, while her father calmly combed her hair. He noticed she was distracted, but he had no idea why. At that moment, they were in a dining room that looked like something out of dark horror movies. And Sian was interested in how they would survive in such a place. Seeing his daughter's thoughtful expression, Matthias assumed she was tired from the trip, and he suggested taking her to bed. He perceived no danger, but Sian already had a plan to save them. In this world, she lived like a common village girl. Sometimes she caught crabs, sometimes she dreamed of a meat stew for dinner, but now she had no other choice. Since she was living a second life, Sian decided to use all her experience. She would do everything possible to regain the deserved happy ending with her dad. And the moment Matthias was about to carry her, Sian asserted that she would protect him. Looking at the large doors of the hall, the girl knew that behind them were hidden all the villains who would fall upon them. But she was not afraid, since she was living life for the second time. And after her declaration, Matthias asked her not to be afraid, as he would protect her. He would not allow anyone to harm his little one. He hugged her tightly, just as he always did when they were still in the village. His warm fatherly hands always squeezed her firmly against his broad chest. To her, they were like a fortress, and his hands, perhaps from years of working in the fields, they were so strong and distinctive. Blue veins could even be seen, although Matthias was not a boxer. They were signs of his hard life. And now, when Sian asserted that she would protect him, the father smiled sweetly, reminding her that she couldn't even speak well. Then he started teasing her and tickling her, something he frequently did so his little one wouldn't get sad. And laughing, the girl kept insisting that she would protect him despite being a jokester dad. And mischievous, Matthias, for his part, added that even though he joked, he still wished the best for his daughter in life. He wanted her to spend the most carefree childhood, growing up happy and healthy. The girl would like to believe him, but since his kindness is immense, she doubted he could protect her. And everything could end in a very sad way, as they are at the exact center of a family of monsters, and Sian would not like to be next to his grave when he is so young. However, Matthias continued to speak affectionately with the girl, hoping she would stop thinking about such nonsense. And she decided to give in, as she had no other option when her father acted like that. If Sian didn't listen to him and didn't behave like a child, Dad would get angry. But anyway, she didn't eat the turnip for dinner. So that the daughter would get her dose of vitamins, Dad put on a show again, showing that the turnip was sad. Then he asked her to apologize to the vegetable, which seemed a bit absurd to her. Then the father clarified that if she didn't apologize, he would harm the turnips. What could she do? Dad treated her like a child, so Sian apologized to the turnips. She appeared to be 5 years old, although she was actually much older. And Dad kept telling her she deserved love because she was a good girl. Sian thought her current task was to protect her innocent father's peace. As they chatted, the soft echo of feminine footsteps resonated in the great hall. Matthias's mother approached them, and he greeted her politely. But for some reason, that angered the woman who entered, who did not consider herself his mother. He decided not to argue with her, and resolved to call her Duchess Ruquella in the future. In the novel, this woman was the owner of the Supreme Magic Tower, and in her youth, she killed all the other apprentices. Then she took possession of the Solo Tower, and among the 12 most powerful mages, she held the 4th rank. According to the novel's plot, Ruquella has now retired, but before that she was also the head of the aristocrats. If they could win her favor and secure her support, perhaps Sian and her father would have a chance to escape from here. But then Ruquella declared that, after Matthias's return, she could no longer leave the property on her own. He himself understood that he was either the heir or an exile rejected by everyone, or a corpse. While Ruquella said these things, the girl became more horrified. Because Dad would probably end up being a corpse, he was no longer an exile and did not claim the heir's position. And deep down in her soul, she became even sadder because she just wanted to leave this castle. Although she had heard the proverb that good wits save, even from a wild tiger's cave, vigilance could not be lost here. But all Sian could do now was execute a distraction move. Ruquella really paid attention to her, calling her a honeypot in sticky rags. Sian felt a little annoyed by the rags, as they were clothes her dad had specially sewn for her. She even promised to learn how to use the sewing machine. The girl announced it proudly, affirming that her dress was the fruit of her father's labor, and a gift from him. But the father said nothing about his clothes. He just asked her to greet the Duchess, and she bowed a little clumsily, although she was rather trying to show some hidden disdain. At first, Sian was sad to realize that she would no longer be able to leave this castle of her own free will. But now her spirits lifted when she remembered a strategy of the Duchess that she had read. Meanwhile, the conversation between the adults continued, and Matthias clarified that he had brought his daughter to introduce her to his mother. Ruquella got a headache from this, but she had come precisely to deal with inheritance matters, and about the trial for the incident with the demon that Matthias had faced. The young man's expression suddenly changed. He didn't want to talk about it in front of his little daughter, and she wondered what kind of incident with a demon it could be, since there was nothing similar in the novel. Although she hadn't read one part, probably that episode was described precisely in that chapter. Her thoughts were interrupted by Ruquella, who got so angry that even her aura changed, and her eyes seemed to burn with sparks. But instantly, she calmed down a bit, although she remembered that her son was still arrogant, and she could crush him without batting an eye. Sian understood that the Duchess was not simply irascible, and at this rate, not only would they not leave, but they would become snacks for crows. The girl did not want to allow such an outcome, and decided to use the ace she had up her sleeve. She jumped off her father's lap and asked him to wait a moment. Matthias, of course, was surprised and worried, not understanding what she was up to, especially in an unfamiliar place. The Duchess was also somewhat surprised to see the girl begin to circle the table. What could such a small child do? Of course, she ran towards the Duchess with a sweet voice and a big smile, and called her grandma. Knowing his mother's character, Matthias feared for his daughter, as Ruquella was capable of cutting heads like a cat with a rat. And Sian kept repeating that if the Duchess was Matthias's mom, then she was her grandmother. The crowning moment was her face radiating happiness upon meeting her grandmother. She moved back and forth in front of the gloomy woman, trying to soften her hardened heart. It was the little girl's superpower attack, blinking again and again, asking Grandma to look at her granddaughter. With a cold and unfathomable gaze, Ruquella observed the rubble of the thieves' guild she herself had destroyed. However, she allowed some children to escape and hide in secret tunnels. But no one knew. No one would understand why the ruthless boss of the Supreme Magic Tower showed a gesture of goodwill. That's how it was in the novel. Sian understood that Ruquella had a weakness for children. Although the children themselves were terrified of her, even the children of notorious villains fled when they saw her, but not Sian. Especially upon meeting her, the girl decided to take advantage of Grandma's weakness, claiming she had been sad for not being able to see her granddaughter. But the woman remained seated with the same stone face, and her gaze expressed strong anger. This shocked Sian, as she was sure her method would fix the situation. And Ruquella remembered that she was the ruler of the Supreme Magic Tower, and she was not someone to be treated with such familiarity. The girl realized that her charm hadn't worked on Grandma, and it was time to strategically retreat. But at least she managed to distract that villain from Dad for a moment. And for Sian, it was a small victory. Suddenly, something like a mockery came from the Duchess's throat. The woman noticed that this girl was not at all clumsy when speaking. It seemed she was trying to scold her like that. Sian felt a little uncomfortable, and pouting childishly apologized to Grandma. But Ruquella still didn't calm down, and declared that no one had dared to look her directly in the eye for a long time. Then Matthias took the girl in his arms and asked his mother to restrain herself. He was preparing to take his daughter away from there before the Duchess got angrier, since she had interrupted him again. Ruquella passionately hated this, but to the girl's surprise, this time she showed no signs of anger, and the little one decided to try using her charm one more time. Then she curtsied and said goodbye courteously, calling her grandma again. The Duchess turned her head towards her, but remained silent, although her face seemed somewhat annoyed. This cheered Sian up, as it indicated that her next move would surely work. When Matthias handed his daughter over to the maid, his mother approached him and began to talk about the girl. Ruquella suddenly recalled the day the little one was born, her hair and facial features. Even that absurd naivety, everything was an exact copy of her mother. Matthias just frowned wickedly and demanded that the Duchess not dare to touch his daughter. But Ruquella had no intention of doing so, convinced that once Sian's childishness faded, she would disappear on her own. Now she was intrigued by why Matthias's mood had changed abruptly, although she knew his temperament well. For that very reason, she had chosen him to play her role because of his wife. And his deceased daughter had suppressed his evil character for 5 years. He lost almost everything, but not the most valuable thing, so he couldn't help but be fierce and cruel. Still, Ruquella asked them not to forget that she had many enemies, both inside and outside the family, because of his demonic madness, but Matthias had no intention of yielding to anyone. Clenching his fist, he understood the gravity of the situation, especially since his daughter was involved. Seeing her son's attitude, the Duchess chose not to pursue the topic and began to prepare the succession. Furthermore, Ruquella asked for her daughter to bathe and begin her studies. She would also be assigned maids. The next day, the girls' breakfast was sumptuous and consisted of exquisite French dishes. For Sian, high-quality black raspberry tea was prepared. The girl did not rush to eat immediately, so she could appreciate the abundance on the table. The maids acted excessively kindly, but their movements were a bit stiff due to their muscles. That generated some distrust, and Sian suddenly noticed something. Their bodies seemed unusually strong, as if they were not girls, but killer cyborgs. But she shouldn't be surprised. The maids of bloodthirsty maniacs were on another level. Sian showed no fear, on the contrary, she greeted them kindly. They responded courteously and informed her that they had to escort her to the chambers of the North Tower. That place in the castle was historically used to execute criminals. Minor members of the family line also died there. On the way to her new home, the girl began to suspect that they wanted to kill her father as soon as possible. He probably doesn't realize anything, and that only made the girl sadder. So, she must devise a plan to ward off the shadow of death from this place. She ran forward, but immediately began to curse the castle mentally for having an endless number of steps. But it wasn't a problem. Sian turned to the maids and, explaining that her legs hurt, asked them to carry her. But she received an immediate refusal, as the maids prided themselves on their physique. And they wanted the same for the girl. There was no other option. The girl had to move on her own, and only God knew how much she cursed the castle at that moment. Upon crossing the last step, Sian was so exhausted that she felt her feet were sticking. Then they showed her her room, which only added a dark feeling due to the cobweb hanging everywhere. Moreover, the maids asked her to wait one more day in the chaos until they finished cleaning. But Sian was already ready to explode with fury, since that was not aristocratic nobility, but her method of torture. But not even her father's protection would make her give up her pride. It seems these maids are in collusion with Dad's enemies. Also, they are new characters not mentioned in the novel. It was Sian's turn to organize her thoughts, and to be alone, she closed the door. But she immediately regretted touching the doorknob, which was covered in shit. For a few seconds, she remained motionless, observing the dirt on her tiny palm. Suddenly, she brightened up, realizing a magnificent plan. A long time ago, when they still lived in the village, Sian got sick often, and her father barely left her side on those occasions. Although the girl felt better and begged Dad to go rest, he, anyway, stayed by her side and slept next to her little bed. Sian felt slightly guilty for getting sick often and causing her father trouble. But Matthias didn't see it that way. He only wished his daughter to be healthy. A little later, the girl saw strange trees from which her father picked fruits. They turned out to be very beneficial for health. That's why Matthias planted several, so his daughter wouldn't get sick so much. He begged her to eat them, never to get sick again, and to live a long time. Strong and healthy, now the maids were preparing the bath for the girl. And while the tub was filling, they decided to do some exercise. They considered rest only stole valuable muscle mass. One boasted that lately her muscles were more defined, while the other even surpassed her strength record today. Their bodies would look even more imposing if they had magical powder, extracted from the local fruit of Yggdrasil. Since protein is a source of protein and the world idol of sports enthusiasts, this fruit is also an excellent raw material for manufacturing the legendary gunpowder from the palm tree. People save money for years to improve their bodies, as this powder is very expensive, and the maid's salary is not high. Sian unintentionally overheard their conversation when she approached to ask if the bath was ready for her. The maids mumbled again, they don't care about her pretty face. So the girl praised their muscles. It worked, the maids reacted with interest. And Sian then became interested, as if thinking out loud, if there was any way to be so strong in her village. She immediately remembered something about sports things and, raising her eyes, stated that it was powder from some tree. The maid stared at the girl more intently than ever, and she continued mysteriously, saying that in her village there were mountains of flour made from the fruits of this tree. Meanwhile, Matthias went to visit Sian, and at the same time inspected the castle from the outside. As expected, it is not the most suitable place for his daughter. Climbing the same infinite steps, the Duke saw that it was too high, and it could be dangerous for a small child. In addition, various terrifying rumors circulate about the local maids. They are considered the Cerberus of the North Tower. Recalling this, Matthias entered the room and immediately became interested in how his daughter was doing. But he saw that she was surrounded by two mountains in uniform, and they were clearly doing something to his girl. His first idea was that they had already received an order from someone, and he decided to resolve the matter with the maids immediately. But then Sian's voice was heard, who had tamed the maids, and together they shouted that she was a true aristocrat. Meanwhile, they were lifting her as if they were fans, and repeating that she was simply amazing. Matthias understood that the maids had quickly fallen under Sian's charm. She was happy and even promised the maids that she would bring them a lot of palm powder. Seeing her dad, the girl ran to him, and he was glad that she had managed to make friends with everyone. And he hoped that, anyway, she wouldn't leave him and would sleep with him that night. Of course, Sian agreed, and the Duke prepared to accompany her to her room, asking her to say goodbye to her friends. The maids looked at Prince Matthias with astonishment, as he now seemed completely different. But before leaving, he signaled them to keep silent about his past. Otherwise, they would lose their heads. Already in the hallway, he hugged her tighter, while she kept hatching her plan. The naive maids fell for her trap, as they didn't know what kind of fruits they were. But after them, illnesses disappeared as if by magic. And Sian considered herself very lucky that those magical trees grew all over her palace. When Matthias put his daughter to bed, she asked him to bring her more fruit, and clarified that she needed the palm nuts he had planted at his village home, because they were the most delicious. Still, in her mind, she couldn't process that her dad was the Prince of Mermond. But it seemed that here, he felt overwhelmed and lonely. Unlike the village, where he smiled even when playing in the yard, here Sian pledged to protect him. It made her so happy to have such a father, something she didn't even dream of in her previous life. Some time later, Sian went with the maids to the training area of the Mermord Castle. There they boasted about how strong they had become with the potion, and now they definitely looked like monsters with little hats. But they wanted the lady to train too, although Sian refused for now since she had to go somewhere. It was a wonderful day, and Sian had heard that there was a beautiful garden nearby. There might be other children her age there, so Sian decided to visit it immediately. There were several guests in the garden, and Sian observed them looking for a friend to share classes with. A few meters back were a girl and a boy, but their expressions showed no satisfaction with the place. Furthermore, they were bothered that the newcomer was staring at them, and they already knew she was of royal blood. That girl had also heard that Sian carried the cursed blood of a bad woman, and that her father would die soon. For them, this girl had fared very poorly, and would soon become an unpleasant orphan. Sian, who wanted to make friends with the children, suddenly felt a sharp pain upon hearing that. They didn't understand why she had come if she was going to die anyway, and concluded that her absurd father had ordered it. That's why they planned to expel her, because there was no room for the weak with cursed blood in their family. It became increasingly difficult for Sian to listen to their words. She couldn't believe that in any case, death awaited her. At that moment, it hurt her more than when a bee stung her, and a large bump appeared on her hand. The father got very scared for the little one, and understood that she was in great pain. But only her dad's real concern, and his close presence made Sian feel better. And now, remembering her promise to protect him, Sian went on the attack and demanded that the children explain themselves. But they just started making faces. Moreover, other children joined them. They called her blood dirty and having cursed eyes again. They even made fun of her, thinking she was about to cry at that moment. However, Sian asked them to clarify why they called her grandmother bad. At that very moment, all the children froze in fear. Their hair stood on end, but not because of the Duchess. It's just that two huge women in uniform, with grumpy faces, were coming towards them from the other side. The maids covered the children with their giant shadows. Sian accused the children of calling her grandmother bad, but one boy immediately denied it. He also called her an idiot, but Sian twisted it again, as if he had called the Duchess an idiot. The girl kept shouting that they had no right to insult her grandmother, and she even warned them that if they didn't stop, they would deeply regret it. The boy ran out of patience and decided to silence her with his small fist. Sian prepared for the inevitable, but instantly saw his fist collide with the large fist of one of the maids. It seems these women will take maximum care of her, at least until they kill her. And her father, but now she had to deal with the children, and Sian hinted to them that they would have trouble if the Duchess found out about their ugly words. And they might have gotten away with it if those little villains had only insulted Sian. But her heart breaks thinking that her good grandmother has to hear such meanness directed at her. Then, the girl used the secret-keeping trick, asking everyone not to tell the Duchess anything. The other children fell silent, and other maids walked away, which means the grandmother will find out everything in 5 minutes at most. Sian decided to punish those little villains this way, since they say whoever comes with a sword dies by the sword. Now these boys swallowed their tongues in fear, but Sian is now sure that her dad will not hear so much evil again. Now she can go to classes, but first the girl must get ready. Classes were held in a large annex of the palace. There, Sian met a dark-haired boy who covered his face with a mask. Named Leonard, at first, he was a little troubled by the idea of having to attend classes with Duke Matthias's daughter, notoriously known. But after watching her for a while, he found her quite interesting. The boy also knew what awaited that girl with her father, and it even hurt him a little. Duke Matthias Mermond has long been known as the strongest in the duchy. He was the most handsome, but also the cruelest descendant of the family, ready to cut the throats of unworthy relatives. When Leonard was already in class, he asked for her name and called her Chestnut. She introduced herself and sank back into her book. Something surprising, since children are usually interested in Leonard's mask. Sian didn't care, although in a way her reaction was natural, and she doesn't like to stick her nose where it's not wanted. Then he noticed that the girl was yawning while answering his questions, as if hiding her emotions. If he were in her place, Leonard would have clarified it long ago, as he didn't like living hidden behind anyone's shadow. Anyway, whatever happens, this girl will not need the edge of Duke Matthias Merman's sword. And in general, she seems very sweet and fragile to him. Then, he acknowledged that in his family, there was no one like Duke Matthias. That helped her, and Sian paid attention with interest. A spark of hope even shone in her eyes, as if they had finally stopped torturing her. Leonardo liked her bright look and upturned corners of her mouth. The boy determined that it smelled of strong hatred and fear here. Suddenly, the boy openly asked if Sian knew that she could die at any moment. It turned out the girl knew it perfectly, but she was sure that nothing like that would happen to her. Now Leonardo's eyes lit up, trying to understand where so much passion for life came from in such a small girl. Her spirits lifted, and he asked Sian Mermond not to give up and to keep living. For a while they sat in silence, and Leonardo smiled, thinking that this brown-haired girl was quite cool. Since Sian couldn't read minds, she was interested in what the boy was smiling about. But she already understood that the only normal people in the entire estate were her and her dad. Before starting the training, she organized her thoughts, but a strange guy interrupted her and ruined everything. His words that there was no one like Matthias in his family would hurt her a lot. The girl understood that dad's kindness was a surprise to the whole family. Even the smallest child knows they can die. For Sian, it was quite painful. She became so absorbed in her thoughts that Leonard became worried about her condition. In general, the girl felt fine, but she had the feeling that a hook had pierced her heart. It hurt her to think about how much Dad had endured among those terrible people, and how lonely he must have felt. Sian is sure that things will get better, as she knows the original story. She even unconsciously clenched her fist, and Leonard understood that she had some plan. He himself reminded Sian of something painful from the past. Then the academic director and the discipline tutor entered. They were a tall woman and a short, stocky man who asked her to introduce herself. She identified herself as Prince Matthias's daughter, but also asked them to introduce themselves. Both refused, as local rules prevented them from revealing personal information. The course began, and Sian tried to remember what educational level the children in this world had. The book did not mention it, so she decided to take a look at what the boy sitting next to her was studying. In his book, there was a multiplication table, and Sian understood that the educational system was similar to hers. But upon seeing a book on pragmatism, Epicurean philosophy, and continuous geometry, she was surprised. It was a topic she had no idea about. Still, she hoped not to look stupid. After all, she had already lived 2 lives, but everything could take a different turn if she turned out to be too bright. This could cause problems, so you have to be careful. And feigning a bit of clumsiness, Sian asked the teachers what they would study today. A woman with a very kind smile recommended that the girls start with fairy tales on the first day, and she even proposed reading a children's story together. But a man with a large belly objected, assuring that the daughter of the mermans should not deal with fairy tales. The teachers began to argue among themselves, since the girl had just arrived in the capital, and they shouldn't pressure her. The tutor insisted that she was not an ordinary child. Sian tried to calm them down, asking what she should do. She hoped they would both reach an agreement, but the teacher only offered her the children's book again. But suddenly, another book loudly hit in front of her nose, startling the girl. The man slammed it shut, assuring that fairy tales are only read by children under 2 years old. And even if Sian had lived in an uneducated village, she should be able to read a protocol book. The girl noticed that these adults looked at her with disdain, and, if she did nothing, they would continue to manipulate her. That's why she agreed to read the protocol book, even if it was very difficult. In reality, the tutor was dissatisfied to have to teach the daughter of a dangerous heir, adopted by a family, and no one knew how long she would last. The professor believed that they were giving him nanny treatment. That's why he refused to let Sian read a children's book and gave her a more difficult one. While reading it, the tutor asked her to summarize the first part afterward. Noticing Leonard's accusing gaze, he decided to deal with him after this brat. He didn't like any of those brats, not even the way the duke's daughter held the pen, nor her bad posture. Looking at the clock, the tutor expected the little student to start crying because she couldn't do anything. But soon the girl raised her hand and the professor rejoiced, convinced he was right, and that she had many doubts. However, Sian announced that she had already finished the assignment. With a mocking smile, the fat man took the folder, imagining the nonsense a 5-year-old girl could have written there. But his face changed instantly, filled with horror and unease. Even his colleague became alarmed by him. The tutor found no words and simply handed her the folder for the teacher to review. Sian, observing his exaggerated reaction, did not understand what was wrong with those adults. She had written a basic answer, perfect for this world. Suddenly, the woman lifted her as if she were fluff, and exclaimed enthusiastically that she was a genius. Sian realized that something had gone wrong, because she didn't want to draw attention, and she should obviously have written only half. But not everyone was happy. The tutor kept muttering reluctantly, and threatened to bring a more difficult book tomorrow. While the girl tried to understand what problem that boy had, Leonard called her, and stated that she had obvious talent, because some things, even difficulties, cannot overshadow. Deciding not to resist so much, Sian even smiled to herself, although she couldn't hide her strength. In the evening, the Duchess was informed of all the day's events, and now she is sure that the rag honey pot loves her more. However, the disciplined tutor considered that some misunderstanding had arisen. When talking about what happened between Sian and the other children, it was evident that the girl defended her grandmother. That detail pleased Ruquella the most, as it showed that the recipient loved her more than her own father. Moreover, in the first class she already showed outstanding progress. But Duke Matthias himself did not doubt his daughter and did not understand why the professor was making a drama out of this. Without much thought, the Duchess proposed granting her granddaughter an encouraging reward, and ordered everything to be prepared immediately. With the intention of pleasing his daughter, Matthias wanted to immediately go and inform her, but his mother asked him to keep the secret for the time being. The Duke did not argue, especially since the priority was to obtain the list of names of those who had said ugly things to Sian. She is smart, but she is a very fragile, sensitive, and adorable girl, like glass that breaks easily. The tutor protested again, sure that Sian is better described as bold and cunning. He believes that she will look eagerly and point her finger at anyone who dares to say anything inappropriate. Then the professor informed Matthias that the Senate wants to propose him as duke. In this world, it is a double-edged sword, and if the candidate is not ready, he will not withstand the test. Matthias felt like they were trying to finish him off, so he had to prepare himself. The Duchess noticed that her son was one step closer to the title of duke and proposed celebrating with champagne. But Matthias refused the offer, as his daughter was waiting for him. Meanwhile, Sian wanted to walk in the garden, but the maids insisted that she must return to the North Hall. The girl got the impression that even her own maids treated her like a prisoner. She also noticed that Leonard, who was walking behind, did not fear those burly women at all, and he approached them asking why Sian couldn't play with them, if there was no law to lock themselves in the hall after classes. Then, the maids clarified that this was ordered by His Highness, Prince Matthias. Sian was not clear why they were shouting her dad's name. There they considered him a kind man and didn't take him seriously. Upon hearing the Duke's command, Leonard understood that His Highness was nervous, and he proposed to give his new friend a gift, hoping it wasn't forbidden. It seemed that the gift from the villainous family could only be a bomb or poison. That's why Sian decided to refuse it. Then, the boy reminded her that she wanted to live, and if she accepted his gift, she could live long and happily. Now Sian was completely baffled. She couldn't imagine what it could be. In front of her eyes appeared a pendant, similar to a small egg with dove wings. The girl immediately recognized what it was. It was the healer fairy's medallion. It also serves to summon the fairy herself. Nowadays, few people can do it. That's why the medallions lost their value. Only a child from a rich family can offer such a gift. At first glance, it looks like a simple thing, but if used correctly, it is incredibly useful. However, one must not forget that free cheese only exists in mousetraps. The only person who gives her gifts for no reason is her dad. That's why she asked him why Leonard had given it to her. The boy was paralyzed for a moment. He just wanted to give his friend a pleasant surprise. Moreover, he liked her so much that if she died tomorrow, he would miss her a lot. Sian did not forget that if she died, it would be the merit of that villainous family. But she did not imagine that it would be so soon, and decided to accept the medallion. The girl thanked Leonardo and asked him to help her put on the piece. But he hesitated whether he should touch the young duchess, as he might curse her. So he called a muscular guy in uniform to help the girl put on the medallion. Immediately, the clasp at the nape of Sian's neck clicked. She noticed that her survival percentage had increased, as she had acquired some healing strength. Now Leonardo seemed like a good guy to her, and she thanked him for the lovely gift. He blushed again, thinking he hadn't done anything special. Sian suddenly realized that she still didn't know his name, and being friends now, she asked him to say it. She remembered that in the whole family, the most normal person, even if a delinquent, was Cecil. The boy introduced himself as Leonard, and Sian was surprised, because a person with that name is a very well-known character in the novel Melody Life. He is also called the Mad Dog of Miramort. The girl almost jumped with joy, something that seemed a bit strange to Leonardo. But he really liked that Sian considered his name cool, because no one had said it before. He even turned red. At the compliment from such a young girl, he looked more like a puppy. Still, he didn't understand why such an adorable boy had turned into a villain. Tom, still blushing, acknowledged to his friend that until now they had called him pitiful. It seemed this young man had a difficult life. Now Sian was not surprised that in the future he would become a sick dog. However, the boy was now excessively naive, and it would be easy for such a small villain to convince him. He was ideal for winning over, and they agreed to have tea together. The girl wanted to tell him something else, but instantly she was lifted into someone's arms. They were familiar hands, and Sian was very happy to see her father. After hugging him tightly, she boasted about having a new friend named Leonard. Then she noticed the strange behavior of the maids, as if their energy had dropped sharply. Matthias, upon hearing the name Leonard, changed his expression, but rested his daughter's head on his shoulder to hide his reaction. Then he addressed the boy and asked him to take good care of his Sian. Leonard, somewhat disoriented until now, promised to carry out the order, although his eyes reflected fear. Later, Sian remembered a novel about a beautiful saint who appeared like a comet and took care of the simple people. It was a love story that transcended the status of prince, but Sian had only read half of the book. and she reached the point where the love between the prince and the saint faced problems because of the merman family. In this family, a battle was fought to determine the heir, and there were three key villains. The first is Delphia Mermond, Duchess Ruquella's adopted daughter, and she is currently training in the north. The second is Selfred Mermond, son of the Senate president, and the most dangerous of all is the dark mage Axel Mermond, who in the book won the battle for the heir, and became the Iron Duke who turned the empire into hell. But Sian had not yet had contact with them. When that day came, she had to be strong to face evil face to face. And like with Leonardo, she decided to subdue them one by one. And for her grandmother, she would double the charm. Sian did not have enough information about the Senate president, but she did understand that the professor hated him deeply. Realizing that they would soon set a trap for her, Sian set out to understand how the fairy's healing power works. To do this, she needed access to the library, but due to her age, they doubted they would let her in alone. And for everything to go well, Sian decided to ask her dad. Meanwhile, Matthias was communicating with a mage who gave him quite detailed instructions. The Duke was ready and decided to attack the Senate first. He had already hired the mages, and he would kill the bedbugs who want to harm Sian directly. Suddenly, the ring in his ear shone with an almost imperceptible flash. Suddenly, Matthias's mood changed abruptly, and he asked the mage to take off his cap, which surprised the mage. Although he obeyed, the Duke confessed that he wanted to plant some potatoes. He also wants to develop a garden under the pinnacle, and was interested in how much all that would cost. While the mage tried to understand what mosquito had bitten his master, the office doors burst open, and Sian entered. Hearing the figure the mage mentioned from behind the door, she stated that he had inflated the price like a scammer. Matthias intervened then, asking his daughter not to treat people with such distrust. She continued saying that there are many bad and dishonest people in the world. Then she began to expel the scamming mage, demanding that he never appear before her dad again. Matthias was still in nascent euphoria, while Sian begged him to listen to her carefully. Then she asked him to frown and squint his eyes. The father should also kick with his left foot. To finish, he had to contort his face, as if he had eaten a kilo of lemons with wasabi at the same time. The girl clarified that if the father did all that as she had shown, no one else would dare to trick him. Matthias was only surprised that his 5-year-old daughter knew such things. Realizing that it was almost showing, Sian stated that it had been a joke, and then begged him to hug her tightly. Naturally, the father was not angry, but he asked his daughter not to do it again, since that family only brought trouble. It hurt him that the best world of his daughters had come to be treated like this, and he decided to solve everything right there. Sian didn't fully understand what Dad meant by cleaning, and he, making a casual gesture, suggested they prepare a sweet strawberry syrup together. The girl liked the idea, but still asked her father that when she spoke. He shouldn't think about other things. The girl was setting things in motion to convince him to accompany her to the library, and finding what she needed there, she would find a way to subdue that cursed family. From the library, Sian brought a stack of books, but none turned out to be particularly useful. And when she picked up another one, surprisingly, the discipline professor snatched it away. He believed that Miss Sian was incapable of understanding such a complex text, and he continued to mock her, while she insisted that she understood everything, and begged him to return what she was reading. Stretching for the book, Sian suddenly felt like she lost her balance. Physics worked its magic, and since she was standing on the edge of the table, the girl tipped over with it. The professor, instead of helping her, just muttered that, although she was a lady, she was very clumsy. However, Sian didn't start crying in front of that angry man. She told Leonhard about that incident, where the professor hated her, and she decided to hate him too. The boy got the feeling that everyone was plotting something lately, and the tutor was working under the academy's direction. But it is rumored that in reality, no child survives if they become the director's target. Sian was very shocked by the news. She deduced that the children were being killed, and Leonhard clarified that he used the phantom labyrinth, a terrifying illusion that drives the child crazy as soon as he sees it. In the end, the victims die from a psychological collapse. Therefore, the boy asked her to be careful if anyone decided to harm Lord Matthias. She would be the first to be targeted by enemies. Leonhard understood that his words scared her and apologized, but Sian was not afraid at all. At night in the castle, 2 people put the guarding knight to sleep. They already knew that Lord Matthias had left the tower to face the heir's trials. All that remained was to get rid of the maids. It could be more complicated with them, as they were not normal maids. There were many rumors about them, but these villains were sure that everything would turn out well. From afar, they noticed two large figures in white aprons, who looked more like ghosts in the moonlight. For the burly women, the villain opted for a hypnotic gas with a unique formula that renders them unconscious in 1 second. It turned out that the gas had no effect on the maids, only that they became furious like real monsters. The villain decided to use weapons. After all, they were combat experts. But as soon as she drew her sword, she received a punch to the throat. The maids seemed weaker than anchovies and wondered why they had come. The second villain also collapsed next to his partner, barely conscious of life in his body. In the end, both villains fainted. The maid misjudged the strength, and they would have to wait until morning to interrogate them. The next day, upon waking up, Sian saw two tied men and immediately asked the maids to explain what that was. They could be companions for afternoon tea, but they looked more like assassins. The maids clarified that they had only acted for the ladies' safety. Sian then asked them to untie their mouths. Perhaps they would be willing to say something useful. Upon removing their gags, the villains shouted that they only came to see Lady Sian. But the maids attacked them without reason, even though they were only looking for an autograph. One of the maids suggested that they couldn't be trusted, but the girl already knew perfectly well. Definitely, the villains had been sent to kidnap or kill her. And perhaps it was the director's doing. The tied man, along with his partner, lowered their heads in silence. Later, Sian received a letter congratulating her on adapting well to her new home. But after a detailed examination, the academy had difficulty determining if she was suitable for the role of hostess of the Mermaid House. While the girl was reading, the maids continued training, using the prisoner as sports equipment. In addition, Sian learned that the academy management had decided to subject her to a small test. After finishing reading, the girl made a decision and asked the maids to help her prepare. They dressed her in an extravagant outfit. But most importantly, Sian did not forget to put on the pendant, which she practically never took off. In addition, a maid slipped the object she had asked for into her little bag. That was her secret weapon, and now the girl was ready, but she decided to head to the appointment alone. In this situation, Sian had to solve it by herself, so she headed straight for the lion's mouth. Meanwhile, the maids, after bidding their lady farewell, hung the villains out the window to get some sun and entertain the birds. A short time later, Sian found herself within the academy walls, where the atmosphere was incredibly oppressive, and the teachers were waiting for her there. The director had a more wrinkled face and immediately asked if she had said goodbye to her exiled father. The girl emphatically stated that her father was not in exile, but the director paid no attention and hurried on to the test, which would take place in a spectral labyrinth. And the objective was simple. Sian only needed to get out of there. If she is truly the daughter of an important person, this will not be difficult for her. Then the director took out a magic crystal. Now the girl understood how this man had been testing all the children, who also had no choice. She also had no choice, although Sian was not going to follow their rules. The director only rejoiced that the girl was walking into the mouth of death, without realizing it. In his eyes, she was just another foolish child. He also added that in his family, they devour the weak, and he mocked thinking that the girl was scared. It was evident that she was trembling a little and lowered her head, as if she didn't know what to answer. But suddenly, Sian stated that one didn't know the end unless they tried. And she called the director an imbecile. It enraged him, but even more so that she only smiled at the dangerous test. The spectral labyrinth is an illusion spell, one of the most dangerous and destructive in the world. It involves the darkest fears of human beings and brings traumatic memories to light. Even for an adult, it is very difficult to deal with, and even more so for a child. Knowing this, the director uses the spectral labyrinth as his main weapon. The next instant, Sian found herself inside the labyrinth, where the air even seemed different. Heavier, but she had no other option, so she just moved forward. The further she went, the more difficult the path became. It was difficult to walk, let alone run. The corridors consisted of broken walls, and the lighting was semi-dark. But soon Sian noticed a light on the horizon. Thinking it was the exit, she was surprised that it had ended so quickly. But it wasn't. A strange voice whispered to her that no one would ever love her, and that she only brought problems. That she was useless trash. That voice was very familiar. It surely came from her past life. Her past memories flashed before her eyes like a movie. In her past life, her parents argued every day, often blaming her. At the age of 8, she hid in a corner during those fights. sometimes for so long that she suffered from hunger and thirst. One day, unable to take it anymore, she decided to quickly go out for water while no one was in sight. There she heard that her parents were planning to divorce and that the mother would keep her. But the woman did not want to. She considered the girl very ugly and didn't even feel she was her daughter. The father didn't want to keep her either, and the only solution was to hand her over to an orphanage. The parents couldn't decide what to do with the girl and argued even more. In the end, they abandoned her because she was ugly and useless. At that very moment, the girl approached her parents, accidentally spilling the cup she was holding. Both adults became furiously angry, as the cup was very expensive. From these people, Sian only received scornful glances, and their words were always cold as ice. When she broke the cup, she only apologized in a low voice. But the mother got even angrier, shouting at her daughter that she didn't even know how to speak correctly. The father joined her, blaming the girl because of her, he and the mother might kill each other. The words of her parents, calling her useless trash who didn't deserve her mother or her father, they hurt her like a knife. The girl backed away, imagining they would hit her, and stepped on the fragments. Her bare feet instantly filled with blood, and the pain shot from her feet to her head. But Sian didn't dare to get up, and kept insisting on apologizing in a low voice. Finally, the father ordered her not to cry and to pick up the fragments, so that at least she would be useful for something in this house. The girl was more than willing to pick everything up, but when she fell to the ground, she also cut her hands, which now hurt a lot. Again, insults were thrown at her, calling her a useless creature who definitely couldn't be their child. The pain of the fragments hurt, but the words of her parents hurt her heart even more. The director, who was watching at that moment, smiled with disdain, remembering that she was very brave a short time ago. But now she was insignificant. Although in the labyrinth all children break without exception, Sian is the daughter of that demon, and the director worries. But the tutor nodded, saying that this girl was no different, when suddenly he felt something strange. Turning around, he saw Sian Mermond raising her head again. This happened because, under the influence of the illusion, the girl began to hear a voice saying that all that was false. It was the voice of her necklace, calling her to wake up, and Sian clutched it with her hands. A warm heat came out of the amulet that allowed her to get rid of the obsessive nightmare. It was not time to relax yet. Sian had to control herself completely, and kept repeating to herself that those people were no longer her family. Her family was the precious daddy Matthias, who loved her. Now there was still a long way to go. It was unpredictable exactly when the test would end, and Sian kept thinking about her father, remembering how he had given her a purse with a rabbit. He stated that that rabbit looked a lot like Sian, because to him she was just as cute and soft. The girl, although she didn't see herself as a rabbit, loved that gift so much, and she always remembered that she had reincarnated with the sole intention of creating a happy family. Dad's soft and loving voice always enveloped her in warmth. It was the unconditional love she didn't feel in her past life, when her parents abandoned her. Sian loves her daddy Matthias very much and wants to protect him. That's why she must survive the labyrinth at all costs. The director and the professor were really upset, not knowing what to do if Lady Murmur got out of the illusory labyrinth. The director especially suffered, as not much time was left before the illusion spell stopped working. While the two men trembled with nerves, Sian remained calm, although her eyes remained closed. The director decided to take advantage of that moment. He didn't want to allow some rat to ruin his life, and he reached out his hand towards the girl, with the intention of silencing her forever in another way. At that moment, thoughts flashed through Sian's mind that she would protect her dad at all costs, because no one loves her as much as this person. Matthias cares about her and only wants to be happy. At that very moment, the labyrinth wall cracked and the girl opened her eyes. The director and the professor were terrified, as that marked the beginning of the end of their evil activities. Sian grabbed the crystal and pointed it at the evil uncle, saying that now it was his turn to face his fears. Before, the girl had read that the illusion spell had a critical limit. That reflection is the effect when the illusion is destroyed, and the illusionist receives a backlash. That's what happened to the director when the crystal's energy enveloped him. Sian reminded him that only a strong man could get out, but the weak would be destroyed. Then she focused on the professor, who was trembling with fear, hoping that Lady Mermond wouldn't notice him. However, now she decided to unleash her fury against him for what he did to the academy director. Besides threatening someone like that, he didn't even pass the test. The professor shouted that, Considering all that, they definitely wouldn't keep her in their family. But Sian looked at him with disapproval, crossing her arms. It seems this guy doesn't understand what is happening. By calling him a complete idiot, she managed to anger the arrogant villain even more. Opening the pocket with her secret weapon, Sian clarified that the tutor would join the director. From the pocket, she took out a hand mirror, which the professor identified as a low-level artifact. This mirror can reproduce any spell recently cast on her, although it is a single-use item that can be easily purchased. However, in this situation, the mirror would be quite useful, although the mentor already knew what horror awaited him. Falling to his knees before the girl, he began to beg for forgiveness and mercy, as he was only following the director's orders. But Sian didn't believe him, because first of all he was a professor, and in his situation he should have changed something. She didn't understand why she should forgive his unpleasant actions, and his pleas had no effect on her. Sian wanted revenge for all the harm he had done to her, and at that moment, the artifact shone in her hand. Both men ended up lying on the floor motionless. Now they were trapped themselves in an ethereal labyrinth and could not get out of there for a while. Because the nightmares of evil people are usually the worst, and now they had to suffer them fully. Upon leaving the dark building, the girl noticed that her pendant was shining with a warm light again. Holding it in her hand, Sian thanked the fairy for her help, although she didn't know if she would ever meet her. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Matthias burst into the room. Furious, that greatly surprised the girl. She didn't expect to see Dad here, much less in such an angry state. But Matthias's face changed instantly, and lit up with a smile when he saw that his daughter was perfectly fine. She remained paralyzed, not knowing if her father would hug her. Her tension began to decrease little by little, although perhaps it was due to her childish body upon seeing her dad's face. The Duke apologized for being late and asked his daughter to return to the castle soon. He took the opportunity to ensure that those two villains never appeared in their lives again. Once home, Matthias reminded Sian that he had warned her not to do anything dangerous, but she assured him that it had only been a test. The father was not angry with his daughter. He only begged her not to follow bad people anymore, since he couldn't live if he lost his little one. Then he asked her to tell him everything, but Sian couldn't confess that she herself had devised the plan, and sent the villains to the ethereal labyrinth. Activating Sweet Flower mode, she declared that thoughts of her dad had helped destroy the illusion, and she had passed the test. Matthias's spirits lifted a little. The important thing for him was that his daughter was safe, and he asked her to be more careful next time. Thinking that Sian had been scared, the father proposed eating a sweet cake together. They served her a strawberry dessert, but Matthias only watched as his daughter enjoyed the taste. Suddenly, for a moment, Sian remembered how the dad from her past life shouted not to call him father. Then she asked Matthias to remember how he had assured her that everything would be fine, even if she turned out to be useless. Even if she was bad and broke the most expensive cups, the Duke became uneasy, not understanding why his daughter suddenly asked such strange questions. But he assured her that it was not important to him, as she was his most precious person. And if she broke something, it was just an object. A new one could be bought instead of the broken cup, and those words sounded a bit unusual to hear now. Matthias added that it didn't matter what she was like. The main thing was to think about the good things and be happy. The girl felt like crying, but she tried to hold back because her dad would worry if he saw her tears. And then she realized that the word dad suddenly awoke many emotions in her. A prolonged groan came from her throat, which immediately moved Matthias, and wiping a tear from Sian's cheek, he apologized for not doing things the way her father would have. But the girl reassured him, saying that he was the best dad. She was just crying with happiness for having him by her side. To Sian, he was the purest person in the world, and she didn't understand how someone like that could survive in this world. The girl's neck tensed with emotion, and she couldn't say anything. But she loved that dad more than anyone in the world, because he was the best dad in the world, and she would undoubtedly be happy with him. Sian cried until night, so much that her eyes swelled, but she understood that she had to stop crying and become stronger, because to feel happiness, she had to survive. And now, without the director, she had time to prepare. She easily overcame that man, but the next rival of the Merman family would not be so simple. However, by expanding her influence step by step in this family, the girl could survive if her dad was by her side. That's why she had to stay away from strangers until she got stronger. At that moment, Sian even smiled, which Matthias noticed, and he was glad she had finally calmed down. Now he himself was ready to share the news that he had been recognized as the heir to the family. And now he was Viscount of the Roserne region and the next head of the family. The news excited the girl very much. It happened too quickly, and now her plan to strengthen herself had collapsed. The appointment was granted by the head of the Senate, who in the novel was the true villain. Apparently, they wanted to make Matthias a puppet. He explained that he was named because of his kind and noble heart, ideal for a duke, and he understood that they valued him highly, but Sian didn't know how to tell him that it was pure nonsense. Now the Senate definitely plans to take advantage of her father. It was already difficult for the girl to secretly increase her strength, and her dad had even claimed the role of heir. In addition, she understood that as soon as Axel found out, he would come running for them. And now she is sure how the development will be. The president will manipulate Matthias, and then Axel will kill him. By being elected heir, if he tries to escape, every family member will try to kill him. The only way to help Dad is to make him a competent duke. Then, Sian proudly declared that her dad would be an amazing duke, and she would support him in everything. Matthias didn't fully understand, but he liked her words, which gave him strength, and he hugged her tightly. Even so, a long road awaited them, and the girl knew they had to act fast. Implying to Dad that it was not time to relax, Sian asked him to remember what she told him last time, and she reminded him of all the moves he should make, always keeping his head held high. Only the most important thing remained, and Sian asked Dad to repeat carefully after her. Then she started letting out insults, as if she were reproaching a villain, leaving Matthias with his hair on end. She is just a child. The father was in a state of shock, without understanding where she could have learned such terrible words. Then Sian understood that for his tender heart, it was too much. The next day, after recovering from the shock, Matthias scolded her for almost an hour for her horrible expressions. He just doesn't understand what she feels. Sian worries that he is too soft, and she only gave him some advice, because when he becomes Viscount, many villains will appear who will try to steal the inheritance. The girl didn't know how to solve it quickly, as time was running out too soon. She thought about it excitedly while having a snack, and the maids became uneasy, believing she had problems with her appetite, but she just kept concentrating, devising another plan. The next day, classes were cancelled due to the sudden death of the director and a professor. It seemed strange to Sian. They shouldn't have died so quickly. Evidently, there was a problem with the illusion spell. However, she didn't have time to think about the death of secondary enemies. So, they came to congratulate her, as the Duchess plans to give her a new castle in honor of her father's promotion. Now the lady will have a spacious room, and these maids wish to serve her even more. Because of that attitude, the girl promised them to build them a large gymnasium in the castle when she grew up. Even though they didn't have it yet, the maids' sad expressions lit up with happiness. Sian understood that with this development, they had only taken one more step towards death, since the news that Matthias became heir spread quickly. The main villain, Axel Mermund, could appear at any moment. This man is obsessed with the desire for power and has a terrible bloodlust. In reality, he has killed all family members who opposed him during the rebellion. And now there was no doubt that her dad's name occupied the prestigious first place on Axel's victim list. Sian was sure that the fight against Axel was inevitable, but she didn't imagine it would happen so soon. Fortunately, the adventure with the director was successful, and the girl could double the stakes and take risks. With a brilliant idea, Sian immediately went to the maids, and with a majestic voice and confidently, she stated that she needed to meet with her grandmother immediately. Duchess Ruquella, meanwhile, was enjoying a cup of tea with her close friends. One of the ladies heard that Axel Mermund was writing about his feats and victories over enemies on the battlefield, but perhaps it was only to show off his skills. The ladies considered him arrogant and daring. In addition, Lady Delphia was making a scene by wanting to participate in the heir selection, apparently without realizing that it was already too late. Then they talked about the sudden death of the academy director, saying that he simply passed away in his sleep. But Ruquella did not see a big problem in it, as someone else would surely be appointed in his place. Her indifferent reaction seemed strange to her friends, and the ladies remembered Matthias, recognized as heir, whose identity was even confirmed by the president of the Senate. But the Duchess remained in complete silence, as if she were not interested, and one lady decided to change the subject. The topic of conversation switched to Matthias's daughter, and that lady had heard that the girl was incredibly smart. Another became uneasy, as it was the child of that woman. A single comment about her could spoil the relationship between the Grand Duchess and Matthias. That very woman was the reason Duke Matthias abandoned his family. She is the cause of the infamous incident of the devil in the old capital. She was Matthias's lover, and she, and also the mother of little Sian, tried to summon a demon but failed, and she did not manage to complete the summoning. The informants discovered her actions and took her to the temple, where a tragic death awaited her. And Matthias killed every single one of those who denounced Yaya. And his methods were so terrible that the incident was called a bloody purge. Everyone at the table understood that the Duchess would not like that topic. But suddenly, with a sweet smile, she asked her friends if they had already seen that little jar of honey. She was reminded of how that girl waved at her and called her grandmother. Ruquella confirmed that Sian was very intelligent and said it with a certain dose of pride. But the ladies still didn't understand why she called her honey jar. The Duchess noticed their surprise, but did not understand their reaction, while they guessed that Ruquella liked that girl. So, one after another, they began to repeat how wonderful Sian was. At the same time, they remained attentive to the Duchess's reaction, thus confirming their suspicions. They also praised the girl's indomitable spirit, especially when she opposed the plot in the garden. It is true, since most children her age still run around with a runny nose. But Sian is amazingly intelligent. Ruquella understood that she might give herself away, and pretended not to be very interested in that girl. Her words once again confused her friends, as they had just seen a glint in the Duchess's eyes. At that moment, a maid interrupted the conversation upon arriving at the Duchess with a report. She was angry at first, as she had asked not to be interrupted for a while, but apparently it was urgent. The maid reported that Lady Sian had requested a private audience. Before the maid finished, a well-groomed girl immediately entered. Smiling sweetly, Sian confessed that she had missed her grandmother a lot and had come to visit her. Seeing that cute creature, the ladies simply sighed. The Duchess proposed to end today's tea and asked everyone to leave. She went to the room with her granddaughter, not yet knowing why the little one had come. Sian couldn't meet with the guild for now, so she hoped to get information from the Duchess. At that moment, she wanted to know everything possible about Axel, but the girl didn't know how to start the conversation. Ruquella broke the silence first, calling her granddaughter a honeypot. It was unexpected, but even more surprising was her request for Sian to sit on her lap. Not knowing how to react, the girl obeyed and immediately climbed into her arms. While preparing her cakes, she tried to understand why the Duchess needed that. Moreover, this way she couldn't see the grandmother's face, as she was facing away, but she could hear her breathing well. Then Ruquella confessed that in about 3 months, a big event would happen in the family. There will be many guests, but if the 3 suitors are excluded, the others will just be insignificant people. Ironically, the conversation came to what Sian wanted to hear, and she guessed that those 3 were very evil. The grandmother did not argue. They are terrible people, but now it wasn't that important. The most annoying among them is Axel, who will return in a month after defeating a monster. He is an irritating and arrogant guy, and the girl understood that she only had 1 month left to win over this family. But for now, she remained still on the Duchess's lap, pretending to be a good girl, while thinking that she still had time until Axel returned to start the fight for the title. Seeing Sian's strange reaction, Ruquella understood that she had told her scary stories, and she asked her to calm down. Matthias should take care of everything, but that only made her more agitated, because then everything would end in a massacre. She couldn't entrust it to her soft and gullible father, so Sian would have to take down the dark mage herself. For that, she could study white magic or divine power. In addition, the Duchess warned that the little one might get a little bored until a new academy director was appointed. But Sian didn't see it as a problem, since this way she could visit her dear grandmother more often. The girl was so focused on gaining the Duchess's support that she hadn't noticed that this woman could be her best teacher. The Duchess has great influence in the family and still has access to high spheres, and as a powerful mage, she can tell Sian a lot about white magic. Moreover, such a woman should have the strength to contain Axel's dark magic. So Sian used her childish charm again. She turned sideways to get a better look. Then she added that she loved her grandmother very much. She continued praising, calling the Duchess the most incredible and cool grandmother in the world, and wishing to become someone like her. Ruquella was a little surprised, more than a little. No one had called her that, and not even she herself believed it. Sian kept insisting, asking what she had to do to be the same as her grandmother, adding that she wished to learn how to deal with dark magic. Sian repeated that she wanted to be as strong as the Duchess. Then silence fell, and feeling the tense atmosphere, the girl thought she had said something inappropriate, and that the Duchess would get angry. But she kept praying mentally that everything would turn out well. The Duchess sighed deeply. Then she admitted that she had no choice but to teach her granddaughter, while smiling broadly. The girl's behavior reminded her that she herself had been like that when she was young, even more so with the problems she had with teachers now. So the Duchess would have to teach her herself, while Sian was happy that everything had worked out, and she couldn't wait to start. Ruquella decided to start teaching the next day. Today she can't do anything about it, because there are many things to prepare. The next day, they agreed to meet in the garden. But the girl didn't come alone and brought Leonard with her. Seeing the Duchess's slightly confused expression, Sian remembered that she had written about this boy in her letter. Just yesterday, she asked Leonardo to join the training, since she had nothing to do at the moment. However, in the future, he should become a strong partner for Sian, and she thought it would be better for them to train together. One might think that she had called him because of the Duchess's passionate determination, but it wasn't like that. Surprisingly, Rook accepted him quickly, but stated that she did not train children who did not meet her standards. And at that moment, the Duchess expressed the desire to see what that boy was already capable of doing. To do this, she planned to conduct a simple test, and immediately an energy ball appeared in her hand. Sian already understood that, unlike the academy, here she didn't need to hide her abilities, which meant she would succeed. First, she took a general knowledge test, in which she scored the highest in logic. Leonardo also scored the maximum, and if he continued like this, he wouldn't have problems. The Duchess praised the children for their good knowledge, but that was only the beginning. The next step would be to assess their magical strength, in which physical endurance was also crucial. Normally, abilities vary greatly, depending on the amount of magical strength. Therefore, this test was the most important event of the day. But Sian was confident. The children were asked to close their eyes and try to feel the mana in their bodies. Then Ruquella would check their quantity. The children obediently followed all instructions. The Duchess approached Leonardo and began tracing complicated finger movements around his head. In the romance, it was said that Leonardo would be by Axel's side. He must have quite a bit of mana, but Ruquella still couldn't determine the exact amount. But she discovered that this boy is different from his parents, and his potential is on another level. It seems the Duchess knows about Leonardo's adoptive parents, but in the original, no details were given about those people. After confirming that with proper training, he would become an outstanding mage. Sian was even happier that he was on her side. Suddenly, the Duchess asked if the boy currently lived in the palace. Leonardo did not answer immediately, but his silence made Ruquella understand that she had guessed correctly. Then she began to ask about the real reason he approached Sian, as another mage could have trained him too. Again, Leonardo did not answer. He just asked who she was referring to, Axel or someone else. But then he confessed that he simply liked being close to the chestnut-haired boy, and instantly turned to the girl and smiled sincerely and sweetly at her. Sian was a little worried that he spoke disrespectfully to the Duchess, maintaining a proud attitude. Because of that, she herself could fall out of favor with her grandmother. But suddenly, the latter stated that Leonardo's answer satisfied her. Both children were a little surprised, and Sian tried to understand what there was about her friend that pleased the Duchess. Rackwell's attention was drawn to the boy's mask, and she reached out to try to remove it, but he pulled away as if burned and begged not to be touched. That action could anger the Duchess, and Sian felt her heart pounding wildly. She immediately noticed that her friend was trembling and breathing with difficulty. The boy acted brazenly, but now he looked like a scared, hissing kitten. The girl felt very sorry for him. He seemed not only terrified, but also lonely. To cheer him up, she took a step towards him and took him by the elbow, showing him that he was not alone. Her gaze conveyed friendship, and Leonardo gradually calmed down. Seeing the reaction, the Duchess decided that the boy had suffered enough and let him go. Now it was time to test Sian's abilities, something the girl greatly appreciated. She proudly told her grandmother that she was ready. Ruquella extended her hand towards her again, with a bright glow in her palm. That glow seemed to scan her entire interior, as if penetrating her body. But the Duchess frowned. She seemed more disappointed than angry. She found nothing in that small body. There was no trace of mana. When Sian heard it, her world turned upside down. She didn't expect something like that. Leon was also surprised, and Sian was about to lose her composure, unable to believe that her body was so weak, although she felt something moving inside her. She asked her grandmother to check again with more attention, but the Duchess was still trying to understand why it had happened. Moreover, she had never seen such a case. There was not even a trace of mana left in her body, so Sian suspected it was a punishment for her transmigration. Seeing her concern, her grandmother calmed her down. Her lack of mana did not make her useless. Moreover, she could still train, although in a different way. Sian had a sharp mind and could be an excellent administrator. However, that did not convince her. She had to face Axel, and suddenly a brilliant idea occurred to her. She just had to go to one place. In this world, mages are not extraordinary, but Sian knew for sure who was the most powerful. And if she couldn't be powerful by magical means, she would at least surround herself with strong people. The girl went to the church of Ziona. The holy melody resided there, which gave love even to those who did not believe in gods. And she always comforted those who had committed evil deeds and came to the temple repenting. Her power was astonishing. It came from sacred relics granted by gods and holy knights. Melodia fought against villains, including the Merman family. The first place where she became famous as a saint was the church of Ziona. Her holy knights were also there, among whom the strongest was Knight Ted. It was there that Sian planned to go and also pray for the gods to grant her extraordinary abilities. Hearing her granddaughter's wish, Ruquella hesitated a little. She saw nothing special in that church. That church is small and located in a village, so it is less visible. But it is still a church. There would inevitably be hostility towards the Merman family there, so the honey pot could be in danger. The Duchess herself could not go with her granddaughter, as the church might consider it an act of aggression. However, the girl kept pleading with her grandmother with the look of a puppy, and she decided to give her a present that Sian should take with her when she went there. The children were a little surprised, and the Duchess clarified that it was a rather common object, but very useful. After a while, the girl and her friend arrived without problems at that church, thanks to her grandmother's abilities. During the journey, Leonardo supported Sian at all times. In addition, for security reasons, she also took some reliable maids with her. Now, following the original novel, she just had to properly recruit the brother knight. The knight's sacred power should greatly help in the confrontation with Axel. In front of the temple entrance, full of determination, the girl prepared to undertake her mission. The only problem turned out to be the staircase, with an endless number of steps that Sian hated. She even thought she would die before reaching the top, but one of the maids offered to carry her on her back, so that she would arrive comfortably. Sian was happy, but now she didn't understand why it wasn't like that at home. Although it didn't matter now, in the blink of an eye, thanks to the maids, they reached the main entrance of the church. However, as soon as they arrived, the maids apologized and explained to the girl that they had to leave. The holy church is contrary to the Merman family, so they cannot stay long, and they will wait outside. Sian even scratched the back of her neck, as for a moment she forgot that the church was an enemy of the villain family. But she had to find the holy knight, and she promised that everything would be fine, as she was already grown up. The maids remained worried, and those emotions on their somber faces seemed quite curious. Meanwhile, Sian walked down a wide and long corridor, not knowing in which direction to look for the holy knight. She couldn't check every corner either, but then she saw some young priests nearby, and she decided to ask them for help. She approached and greeted them politely, but those boys showed no kindness. One of them even thought she had come to donate, and demanded that she hand over the money immediately. From Sian's clothes, they knew she was an aristocrat, but they seemed to chase her away because she was alone. Not even a maid is nearby. It seems she doesn't have money either. And the priests considered her a beggar. Their words hurt Sian, and she remembered her dad's words, that to him she was more valuable than anyone in the world. She had to answer those insolent ones, but her voice failed her, and her body didn't react. These were consequences of the traumatic experience of her previous life. When her parents abandoned her, the boys continued to mock her, saying she was slow because she listened. But she didn't answer. They also made fun of her chubby body and claimed that she was kicked out because she was a pig. With those phrases, they attacked Sian's father, which enraged her more and more. Then her patience ran out. She regained control of her body and snapped back angrily. She clarified that she was not a beggar, that she was looking for someone, and demanded that they step aside. In addition, to ensure it, Sian embellished her words with famous foul language. The young priests were a little shocked by the girl's audacity. Then they also demanded that she leave their church. Moreover, One of them grabbed Sian by the hair, but she only cursed and threatened to do the same to him. And she did it. And now two angry boys with red faces were pulling each other's hair across the hall. Only a man's voice, who angrily demanded an explanation, managed to calm them down a little. A young golden-haired knight approached and reprimanded the priests so they wouldn't mock his friends. While clumsily fixing her ruined hairstyle, Sian recognized that golden hair and blue eyes. A tall young man dressed in white and a sword on his left side, like a perfectionist who takes care of the whiteness of his clothes. He had a barely visible scar on his left cheek. It was the knight Ted himself who was supposed to join Sian. The boy who had grabbed Sian's hair immediately claimed that he hadn't even touched her with a finger, and that she was the one who caused the scene. And his friends seconded, saying that they were the victims. But Ted understood that they were lying, and reminded them of the case with the maids. Then the main troublemaker became indignant, since the church guardians were supposed to protect, not reprimand, but for some reason, the knight did not side with them, and the knight threatened to inform Gabriel if he continued like this, as such behavior was inadmissible for priests. Listening to their argument, Sian thought she had entered a madhouse, not a holy temple. The boys started to rebel, but then they simply asked to kick out that insolent girl. The boy's behavior revealed that he perfectly knew that priests ranked higher than knights. Sian wanted to ignore him because they are children, but it would be useless and she would end up complaining. She pointed out that they were the ones who started it, but the boys did not give up, defending their position. She had one last option, and Sian showed the precious bracelet, asking them to guess what it was. But to the boys, it was just a common toy. They even believed that the girl was trying to bribe them with that cheap object, even though it looked very beautiful. Then they insulted her hands again and called her an abandoned pig. But then they noticed how her face contorted into a strange expression, halfway between anger and cunning. And Sian clarified that the object on her arm was a special protective artifact that her grandmother had given her. The girl stated that all their excuses were a despicable lie. That didn't prove helpful, and Sian didn't understand why, with such obvious proof. They behaved so shamelessly. Then Sian warned that if the priests kept acting like that, she would call her grandmother. It didn't sound convincing to them, and the boys mocked her even more. Unable to take it anymore, Sian revealed that her grandmother was Duchess Ruquella Mermond. She was even more terrible than Boogeyman, and the girl threatened that she would come for those spoiled children. Knight Ted finally decided to end the dispute and asked the visitors to follow him. They were taken to a small courtyard, where they were offered sweet tea and a delicious pastry as an apology. But the girl was not angry. She understood that it was very difficult to become a priest. There could not be the slightest flaw. By showing such forgiveness, Sian made the brother knight look at her differently. Ted thanked the young lady for her kindness, and then began to ask what had brought a member of the Mermont family to the church. Now was the time when the girl could use a fragment from the original book. Melodia had used the same method to win over that knight, and Sian claimed to have seen an advertisement. It said that a certain Ted from the church was looking for his family, and there, the knight admitted that he was Ted. He himself had put up the posters with pictures, and Sian confessed to having seen a boy who looked like the one drawn. So she was on Pelred Street. She gave the knight hope and promised to reward the girl if it were true. He was willing to give her whatever she desired. Sian understood that it was a perfect opportunity and began to tell him about herself. And her dad, how did they live in the village? Miaman Castle seemed very scary, and the girl asked Ted to become her knight. Ted was speechless. He couldn't even imagine that something like that would happen to him. Still, he understood the lady's wish, but now it wasn't possible, as there was another person he needed to protect. Sian felt disappointment and betrayal from the original book, because there was definitely no one there that this knight needed to protect, although it could be something personal, which is why the author of the book did not mention such things. Although it hurt, Sian asked for permission to help him find his relatives. Her insistence surprised the knight, who clarified that even so he could not guarantee her protection. What surprised her most was his next answer. He had already helped her, therefore he didn't need to protect her. Sian understood that it was about faith, and that Ted greatly valued the conviction of the main church. Reflecting on the girl's wise words, Ted knelt before her and thanked her for her kindness. He would never forget her kindness, and, as a token of gratitude, asked her to accept a valuable relic. Taking the gift, the girl recognized the melody brooch from the book. Obviously, Ted had given it to her when their friendship strengthened. It seemed that Sian was following the same path as her. She didn't know if the knight would join her, but she perfectly knew his desire to protect his family. The next 2 days would be busy for Sian, and she asked Ted to meet 3 nights later on Pelrod Street. Ted gladly accepted, and now the happy Lady Mermond could return home. Then came the day of her father's investiture ceremony to the position of heir, and everyone would witness its splendor. Matthias knelt before the priest and took an oath, after which he officially obtained the title. To Sian, the ceremony seemed very simple, as if her father was the one who would soon be replaced. Some subordinates muttered that Matthias would soon be kicked out when Delphia returned. And Axel, they wouldn't be able to contain themselves and would definitely push him aside. Rumors assured that even that girl, his daughter, would die soon. The whisper of those men was so loud that Sian heard every word. Fury flooded her upon seeing how they treated her, and her dad as if they didn't exist. Instantly, she noticed that they suddenly fell silent and avoided her gaze, which aroused her suspicion. Although perhaps they were afraid of the girl's fixed gaze, not the maids behind her. They, flexing their knuckles, asked Sian for permission to silence the gossips. But the girl refused. She argued that a sudden confrontation could break her dad's heart and make him cry. The maids didn't fully grasp the message, but their faces reflected the desire to reveal a dark secret. Sian became interested, and one maid clarified that Lord Matthias would not cry at all. The little girl didn't get the message, but she assumed they believed in her dad's potential. Then she asked them to remember the names of the gossips, and the maids guessed that she would make an execution list. After that, Sian could go congratulate her dad, whose initiation ceremony had just ended at that moment. Both were happy to see each other, and the girl also wanted to show how happy she was for his achievements. It turns out that today Matthias can be congratulated, not just him. A surprise had been prepared for the girl, but soon they took her to a huge and secluded mansion. It was beautiful there. The front garden was decorated with fountains and flower beds, and the girl was open-mouthed at such beauty. Inside, the house had an imperial air, and Matthias clarified that from now on they, and also the maids, would live there. Stopping and smiling widely, the father asked his daughter to live very happily in her new home. The girl, of course, agreed, as she wanted to see her dad's warm smile more often. And to make him smile more, Sian will protect him in that horrible Mermont mansion. At night, Duke Matthias gathered his loyal knights and asked what they had done with the spy sent by Delphi. The bald man reported that they had beaten and locked him in a dungeon, but it seemed that Delphi would arrive soon. That would happen sooner than Matthias expected, and he allowed the bald man to do whatever he wanted to the spy, even bury him. But his main order was that everyone, without exception, must behave properly in front of Sian, and he added that they must behave like obedient dogs. His daughter would participate in the next day's hunting contest. Matthias asked everyone to be careful. He added in a grave and threatening tone that bad behavior would negatively affect the child's upbringing. Therefore, whoever shows a cruel face in front of his daughter will be executed. The knights at attention promised not to fail, although they knew it would be difficult. The next day, the maids helped Sian get ready, and they couldn't help but admire how beautiful she looked. The girl was very excited, explaining that she eagerly awaited the start of the hunting contests, but in reality, she had another reason to be nervous. Yesterday, Sian felt disappointed to discover that she had no magical powers, and today her grandmother gave her several offensive artifacts. Therefore, the girl is now fully equipped and plans to show in the contests what she is capable of. The maids reported that before the contests, Lord Matthias's friends would arrive to meet her. The girl suspected they were subordinates of the villain's family and hoped they would at least be normal. She hadn't lost hope yet that these people would be as good as her dad. After all, he wouldn't associate with villains. However, if they are good people, she would also have to protect them from the villain's family. And that would be much more complicated. It's just that Sian couldn't leave them unprotected. They were her dad's friends. After finishing thinking and being fully prepared, Sian thanked the maids and headed for the exit. The girl expected that, upon opening the door, she would be met by the kind faces of her father's friends. But behind the door, an incredible surprise awaited her that took her breath away. The people who greeted the young lady did not look normal, but rather like actors in a dance show. The bald one introduced himself as Millie, and the guy with red hair was called Mont, and they asked her to take care of them. Sian remained stunned for a moment, not understanding what horror was happening on this estate. Only her dad's voice, who appeared smiling and apologizing for being a little late, brought her out of the trance, but he himself was speechless when he saw how his subordinates were dressed. He even forgot what he wanted to tell his daughter. Sian couldn't believe they were Dad's friends, but Matthias clarified that they were a bit clumsy, but very good people. Then the Duke regained his composure, picked her up, and they headed for the cart, because they were already a little late. While Sian wasn't looking, Matthias turned to those friends and promised to talk to them later, and Millie and Mont began to realize that perhaps they had exaggerated the performance, but it was to appear nice. The night before, the Duchess of Fiamere moored, on a secluded estate, received unpleasant news. While she was in that isolated village, Matthias was named heir to the family, something she couldn't believe. But now, with Matthias and Axel, the fight for the throne seems to have become a three-way race. One of the servants tried to soften the situation, assuring that the appointment was probably a distraction. The servants believe that the title of Duke belongs to Delphi, but she didn't want to listen to their flattery. In any case, she must now think about how to turn the situation around, and this could help her take advantage of what matters most to Matthias. Delphi quickly guessed that it was the girl he had brought with him. If due to an unfortunate misunderstanding she disappears, it will greatly sadden Matthias. Delphi found the plan ingenious and could have a little fun. On the day of the home competition, on the way to the forest, Sian reflected on what she had recently seen. Of course, one shouldn't judge people by their appearance, but those men seemed quite dangerous to her. Although the maids also seemed frightening to her at first, they actually turned out to be very kind. The main thing is that they are on her father's side, but just in case, she decided to ask Dad. Matthias didn't understand why his daughter was hesitant, and she clarified that they looked more than strange, even terrifying. Now the Duke understood the cause of his daughter's nervousness. His face darkened a little. He was clearly worried that his friends would scare the girl, and Sian claimed that perhaps she imagined it, and she wasn't scared at all. Dad's smile returned and he assured her that those people were good, begging her not to worry. Sian believed him, but the problem was that her father considered everyone absolutely charming and good. She herself did not think the same, so she needed to find out everything possible about today's house. The coachmen of her carriage were precisely Millie and Mont, who complained that he didn't want to die, and perhaps the bun on his head was indeed unnecessary. Instead, he probably should have worn a star-shaped hairpin, which would surely have pleased Lady Sian. They decided to try harder in the future, especially with the home competitions ahead. Soon, the carriage arrived at the villa in the Shern forest, where they planned to hold the house competition. The maids were still worried about the carriage, noticing that the girl had gotten tired during the trip. The father advised her to rest a little, as there was still time until the start of the competition. He himself would arrive later, as there were still some matters to resolve. The girl happily agreed, and the maids suggested preparing a bath for her and serving her some cake. But Sian refused. She herself had a lot to consider here. First, she needed to find out the true identity of those strange helpers, and plan a meeting with the Holy Knight Ted, which would take place tomorrow. And anyway, it was unknown what could happen in today's home competition. To be prepared, Sian decided to check the artifacts her grandmother had given her. She put an artifact called the Blue Power Gourd in her pocket. She also put on the Absolute Protection rings and the Human Division necklace. Preparation is complete. And now, if those people cross paths with the girl with bad intentions, she will test each of the gifts on them. Suddenly, the girl heard a commotion and sounds coming from outside the room. The maids also noticed something strange, and it seemed like something was happening outside the window. Looking from the balcony, the maids saw some people, and Sian was shocked again at what she saw. This time, the subordinates had gathered under the balcony with flowers in their hands, as if they were going to sing a serenade. The one with a mohawk, and holding a flower that seemed to have exaggerated lips, he was clearly more nervous than everyone else. In those men, Sian recognized her dad's friends, and the maids understood that they intended to give the flower to the girl. But she herself saw nothing beautiful in him. Rather, it looked like they intended to poison her. Suddenly, the four of them got scared of something and started to flee, and Sian is again sure that there are not two mountains behind her. The maids considered them simply shy, but the girl only saw their suspicious behavior. Moreover, at that moment, she felt a strange feeling that these people had certainly not caused. Meanwhile, behind the villa, from some bushes near the fence, a mysterious man was watching. Shortly after, everyone headed to the Launcher Forest, where fireworks were set off at the start of the contests. The ground had been prepared there, and the place for the Duke and his daughter was on an elevation. Matthias was anxious that his daughter might not find it very high, but she reassured him by assuring that everything was fine. Moreover, she would soon be a great villain and had to get used to such heights. Then she started looking for her dad's helpers, who still hadn't shown up anywhere. But seeing the scared horses, it was clear they weren't hiding anywhere nearby. The girl indeed saw them standing to the side, with the same unsettling look that might scare at first glance. Sian was not afraid of them. Something else should monitor them to find out if they were plotting something strange. Soon it would be time for the Duke to leave the house, and the girl hoped that at least he would manage to catch a rabbit. But even if she didn't get any prey, she would praise him anyway. When Matteo was descending, some girls approached and asked him to accept their embroidered handkerchiefs. In home competitions, such a tradition exists. The lady placed the handkerchief on the knight's sword to wish him luck. Sian couldn't believe she had completely forgotten that, being a duchess, and began looking for a handkerchief for her dad. Finding a hygiene handkerchief, the girl wanted to give it to her dad, although it seemed too simple for a duke. However, it is the first home competition, and she must give him a lucky charm. The girl immediately ran towards him, almost falling off the podium in her haste. Everything went well, and she asked her dad to accept her handkerchief. It's a simple thing, and Sian promised to give him something better next time. The main thing is that Matthias takes care of himself and is more careful. With a sincere smile, the Duke accepted his daughter's gift, assuring her that it was the most beautiful handkerchief, and he promised to bring the most beautiful animal. Then they said goodbye, and Matthias was ready to go home. Sian was glad her dad had no sense of taste, although she felt a little embarrassed anyway. It was time to watch those strange subordinates using the projector ball, which her grandmother had also given her. In it, the girl saw how those men surrounded the rabbit and tried to catch it with their hands. They managed to do it, but it seemed unfair to Sian that 3 men against a small animal. And weak. It seems those guys are even more idiotic than I thought, but something unusual happened. With a strong movement, that rabbit started showing karate moves to free itself from the hunters. Sian couldn't believe with her eyes that those men were defeated by a rabbit. It really seemed strange that they couldn't deal with a small animal. But that wasn't enough. The men got on their horses and started fleeing from the friendly furry monster. Thinking they were just as weak as her father, Sian decided to protect these subordinates too. At that very moment, the girl felt the atmosphere around her change and become much heavier. At the same time, she also activated her grandmother's artifact. Sian understood that someone was definitely targeting her, but the strength of the protective artifacts would undoubtedly protect her. And indeed, a magic shield protected her from the magical blow. Then she informed the maids that there were bad people here and that someone was using magic against her. That only excited the gymnastic ants, as they could demonstrate their strength, and they set out to capture the wrongdoers. And Sian understood that the malicious ones were simple failures, since even without mana, she detected them only with artifacts. However, she didn't understand why she had become their target, nor who they really were. Perhaps the villains hoped to capture her to use her as bait. Then their real target might be Duke Matthias, who was precisely in the forest, far from his daughter. Worried about her father, the girl asked the maids to follow her. She intended to sneak into the forest and save her dad before it was too late. Meanwhile, Matthias's subordinates were reflecting on how to capture the rabbit alive, since they had never done it before. There they noticed a small creature among the bushes. It was a goblin that was also staring fixedly at them. But the men saw it as a good opportunity, as goblins are tastier and nutritious. Moreover, they are tough and, unlike the fragile rabbit, harder to break. Also, they can be good pets. That small monster seemed quite adorable to the hunters. As they prepared to capture it, Millie and Mont were sure that Mrs. Sian would also like it. The goblin understood that they wanted to capture it alive and ran away, while they, in pursuit, they tried to convince it to surrender for the princess. Even the goblin understood that they were ribbon-wearing idiots, but it still fled to save its skin. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the villains tried to understand why they couldn't kidnap their target, but their mage determined that something was blocking the magic. The one-eyed bandit decided it was the exiled Matthias, who had placed a shield around the platform. That's what aristocrats normally do, and since their method wasn't working, he decided to simply seduce the child. It turns out their accomplices still didn't know exactly who their target was, and were very surprised to learn that it was Sian Mermond. Instantly, her soft voice was heard, and the girl coming out of the forest asked why those people were talking about her. The three villains were horrified for a moment, not expecting to see Sian Mermond in front of them. But instantly, they considered it luck, and the bandit with a braid started flirting with her, asking her what she was doing there. The girl explained that she was lost and asked for help getting home, which made the villain like her even more. Suddenly, he started asking what he was doing there, assuming he was also lost. He immediately replied that an important man hired them and that they were carrying out a mission. According to them, the person in charge is very handsome and incredibly attractive too. Hearing that the girl liked handsome men, the bandit promised her that she could meet him soon. But it was her plan to force them to confess all the information, since they had relaxed upon seeing her as just a child. And as often happens in child kidnappings, the villain offered the little girl a candy. However, Sian refused, so the bandit started insisting. Anyway, she would have to eat one, and they started forcing a specially prepared candy into her. But immediately, his expression changed when he saw the girl taking out a strange object. It was one of the artifacts with which the little girl planned to get rid of those damn people. At that very moment, in the meadow where they were, there was a small explosion. Then, with the help of the maids, the criminals were tied to a tree, but the ladies would like to add more to those guys. Cracking their knuckles, they clarified that kidnapping children is very bad. Still, they awaited the order of the young lady, who was still reflecting on how to treat the bandits. In the end, she decided to leave them there. After all, their boss would take care of them later for the mission's failure. Still, Sian was intrigued as to who this handsome man they were talking about was. Of course, she still couldn't imagine that Duchess Delphia was behind it. And realizing that the villains would try to kidnap her again, Sian decided to prepare. Besides, she had already checked the artifact. A signal was heard, and the maid explained to the girl that the home festival was over. Sian became anxious. She needed to return quickly before Dad arrived, and the maid carried her on her back. Upon arriving at the place where her father had left her, the girl was happy that he wasn't there, so she had arrived on time. Also, she curiously wondered what Duke Matthias had hunted, thinking it might be a fox or something impressive. She also saw Dad in the distance, accompanied by Mill and Mont. The Duke was holding a large sack, and seeing his daughter, he lit up with a smile. She was very happy that Dad had returned unharmed. She noticed the sack later. Matthias immediately decided to show off his catch to his daughter and pulled a tied-up goblin out of the bag. Sian felt frustration again. She had expected it to be a cute and valuable animal. Seeing her confused expression, Mill explained that it was an adorable little goblin. Although Sian didn't understand why it was adorable, she noticed that Dad liked it, and the subordinates continued to say it would be an excellent pet. In addition to nutritious and complete food, the girl didn't understand if she had to eat the goblin or raise it, but she stated that it was ugly. It was even horrible, small, and weak in appearance, and Millie and Montom understood that they had failed again. However, Matthias didn't want his daughter to cry, and suggested they look at what he himself had caught. For his girl, the Duke caught something cuter and extended his closed hands. When he opened them in his palm, Sian saw a small white chick. It's a long-tailed tit, but for now, it looks like a little furry ball. The girl loved that creature. She kissed its head and promised Dad she would take care of it. She liked it, although the essence of the competition was to catch something strong and demonstrate her own strength. And the Duke, a little embarrassed but sure, declared that an adorable creature is much better, and he hoped that his disastrous subordinates, who hadn't even dared to speak, would understand it. Horrible and dirty creatures like goblins should not exist at all. After all, cuteness reigns over everything. Meanwhile, Duchess Delphia began to worry because the spies she had sent had not yet returned. Although she hated waiting, she needed to find something out. And then Delphia decided to go herself to witness the spectacle, convinced that she would enjoy watching it. In the forest, a splendid banquet was organized in honor of the end of the home festival. All the participants, and simply the guests, were having fun, but little Sian, for some reason, was sad. Seeing how Dad's friends devoured pork legs, she now saw them as if they were innocent lambs. On the other hand, the girl had managed to confront the spies by herself, and now knew she had grown stronger. Lost in her thoughts, Sian even forgot about food, and her father worried about her lack of appetite. But she couldn't tell her father what she felt at that moment, and only asked him to bring something cool from the tournament next time, like a lion or a dragon, although she herself wasn't sure if Dad could manage it, and he himself stated that those animals were very dangerous. but Milia interrupted, saying that monsters were her specialty, and the Duke immediately stepped on her foot to silence her. Then Matthias asked his daughter to eat to grow strong and not think about lions or dragons. Of course, the father didn't know that. Although she was small and didn't look like a gray cardinal at all, she had eliminated the spies. Suddenly, she had the idea to share her achievement with Dad and immediately confessed that, while he wasn't there, spies had come. At that very moment, the Duke paled upon realizing that the bad men had arrived. He would be even angrier if he knew about the artifacts, and Sian clarified that the maids had taken care of the villains. Matthias, although he is a young aristocrat, the girl noticed that he was very scared. He feared for his daughter. He immediately hugged her tightly and promised her it wouldn't happen again, realizing that she had been very scared. The girl immediately declared that she hadn't been scared at all and asked her dad to compose himself, because they had an extraordinary situation, and she remembered how horrible his family was. Such words seemed strange coming from a little girl, and he started asking how she found out. And he kept shouting that instead of wasting time with rabbits, they should train and do many bad things. When Sian fell, the Duke lifted her up a little and asked her to only think about the good things, because her dad would make sure that everyone in the Mermont family would become good people. His words sounded very convincing, and to reinforce it, Matthias sketched another promising smile, although it saddened Sian, because her father didn't understand anything she was saying. At night, they returned to the castle, but the little lady spent more time lost in thought. The maids were intrigued by what could be occupying the girl's thoughts, but she didn't tell them about her worries about Dad's friends, who seem big. But in reality, they only bark and don't bite at all. Sian hoped they would have at least a little bit of wildness, but they were just a bunch of cowards who liked everything adorable. Just like Dad, a maid arrived with a box and explained that the Duke's friends had sent Sian a gift. The girl found it a bit strange, but hoped there was something useful inside. As soon as she opened the box, she frowned confusedly upon seeing a worn-out rabbit doll there. It turned out that the subordinates had made it themselves, something the maids found very cute. Sian, on the other hand, found it strange that those men with such large hands had managed to create such a tiny doll. Now it was very difficult for her to imagine a future where she would have to support them. The maids noticed the sadness on the girl's face and asked her to share what was troubling her. Sian asked what had become of the spies and learned that all three had been punished, something that didn't surprise her. She was still intrigued by who that attractive man was, and the maids admitted to having consulted the press family. They were people who knew information gathering well, and it seemed they had clues. That encouraged Sian a bit, especially upon learning that one of the maids was named Bench, and she had previously worked for the press family. The other introduced herself as Deadly from the FT family, something a bit strange, as Sian had never wondered about their names. Seeing their powerful muscles, even their names sounded overly strong to her. It happens that in aristocratic households, maids give up their names and are called only by their position. Revealing one's first and last name was equivalent to a promise of eternal loyalty. Sian was very moved by the actions of her maids. Now she could trust them even more. They promised that if another spy appeared, they would cut off his neck like a chicken. Then Bench reminded her mistress that she had an important meeting tomorrow. Immediately, Sian remembered that she was in the middle of an important mission to save the Mermont family. It was one of the important tasks, for which she needed the Holy Knight Ted to join her side. And tomorrow, the girl must carry out a very important action. In the novel, there was a confrontation scene between Ted and Axel, and many suffered under the Dark Mage's hand. Ted was different. He possessed divine strength and was the only one capable of resisting Axel. But due to someone's intervention, the match ended in a draw, although readers were impressed. However, Ted would have defeated the villain anyway. That's why Sian must earn his loyalty and plans to bring his brother. In the original, the heroine gifted with divine strength met Ted's brother on Pelrud Street and recognized him instantly. However, Sian will have to look for him, according to the book's description, where an important feature was scars all over the body. Moreover, in this child, his blue eyes that shone like sapphires stand out. The girl remembered him because, in other aspects, the boy was very similar to her former self. And since he is a boy, he is probably in an orphanage, so Sian decided to start her search there. She dressed the maids in rags so as not to scare people. She disguised herself as a peasant girl, and then they headed to the depressed areas. On the way, Benj, who looked like a huge girl under her mysterious cloak, hesitated a little whether they should go there. But she didn't back down, and upon seeing some passersby, she decided to ask about that boy. Moreover, all of this seemed like a little adventure to her. One of the beggars sitting by the wall became interested upon seeing the children wandering alone. They were not ordinary beggars, but vandals who were now planning to snatch everything from passersby. Dudley suggested taking care of them immediately, but Sian asked them to ignore those guys. They didn't have much time, and the maid agreed to do what they came to do. Instantly, the three turned to move on, but the vandal only became furious, smashed a bottle against the wall, and threatened to hurt the intruders. At the same time, he shouted to give him all the money, or he would disfigure them so much that not even their own mothers would recognize them. Bench saw an opportunity to have some fun, especially because that guy had ignored the young lady's kindness. And in the next instant, the vandal kissed his fist and was thrown to the side, crashing into the wall. Moreover, it is known that these sisters know no moderation, and Bench grabbed him again by the neck. Dudley took care of the others, and both were now molding them as if they were soft dough in the kitchen. Sian stood aside watching, realizing that those guys had asked for it. But then she saw a blonde boy further down the street, standing next to some old barrels. It could be the boy she is looking for, and then she saw the sign on the basket, Priya Rukri. The maids distracted her. They had already gathered the injured wrongdoers in a pile. Sian thanked them for not having killed them, and explained that she needed to talk to that boy. Walking a few steps closer, she confessed that she was looking for someone on this street. As she got closer, the boy became more frightened, and Sian assured him that they were not bad people, and immediately offered him a few treats in her hand. She asked him not to be afraid and to try them, assuring him that they were very tasty and he could get closer. She wanted to give those treats to Ted's brother, but now they were clearly more necessary for the frightened boy. They sat on a bench, and the boy said he lives in the orphanage and came out to look for food. Then Sian asked the boy to help her. The boy didn't understand why she called him small. After all, he clearly looks bigger than her. But Sian didn't calm down, and even promised to pay him if he accepted. That boy must take her to the orphanage. Hearing about the money, the boy agreed to help her and asked her to follow him. Sian noticed the shine in his blue eyes and thought he might be that boy. Later she found out that the boy had lived in the orphanage from the beginning, as he had no family. And he was an orphan. That turned out to be strange, because in the original novel, the younger brother knew about the older one and was waiting for him. Therefore, this boy is probably not Tedda's brother. Soon they arrived at the orphanage, and Sian realized it was the most terrifying place she had ever seen, even in horror movies. Moreover, it turned out that the orphanage was closed and the children had dispersed, each to their own destination. Now Sian felt even more sorry for the boy, as his family had abandoned him, and he lived alone in ruins. Without being able to help it, she remembered her past life again, just like this boy's. Suddenly, the girl proposed that he go with her. Something unexpected for him. He said he was useless and would only be a burden. But Sian asked him not to think about it anymore. Children should be happy, so she proposed accompanying her. Hearing about happiness, the boy was very happy and accepted her proposal. Soon it was time to meet Tedda, who would be saddened if Sian arrived without his brother. So she wanted to ask for more time. Upon meeting him, the knight, seeing the boy, admitted to having found his brother. It was surprising to Sian, especially during his speech. Tedda's eyes filled with tears. The boy came out and asked the knight who he was. Quite angry, as if someone had invaded his territory. Then he stated that he had no family. Sian watched confusedly, not understanding what was happening, or if this boy was really Ted's brother. Minutes before, Sian had asked the golden-haired boy to stay nearby, because she needed to meet someone. And she clarified that he was a very good person, a holy knight, and that he would keep his promise. The boy was a little surprised to hear about the holy knight. He liked those brave warriors. He had heard something about them, but always dreamed of being like one. The girl noticed that, although he shared the dream, his face was sad for some reason, and she encouraged him by saying that he would achieve his goal. Now she was witnessing an awkward moment between brothers, although they were real brothers. Ted begged the boy not to be angry, assuring him that he had never abandoned him. However, the boy was convinced of the opposite, and sadly recalled the moment his brother left him on a dirty street. Ashid, as the boy was called, didn't believe it was a misunderstanding, or that Ted had always looked for him. Meanwhile, Sian began to get anxious, because she had deliberately led them to the alley to avoid attracting attention. But the brothers only shouted at each other, and the girl didn't know how to calm them or reconcile them. Ashid continued to murmur, not understanding how his brother could become a holy knight after leaving him. Ted, apologizing, explained that at that moment he was in great need, which is why he couldn't find his little brother. But Ashid didn't believe him and demanded that he not call him brother. Moreover, he stated that he no longer used his old name. At that moment, Sian decided to intervene and asked why Ted had abandoned his brother. He repeated his story from the beginning, saying he hadn't left him, but rather, on the contrary, he never stopped looking for him. To do this, he constantly tried to stay near that place, but his searches were unsuccessful. From the tremor in the holy knight's voice, the girl understood that his feelings for his brother were sincere. Too bad the younger brother doesn't know it and doesn't try to accept it. But Sian also noticed that Ashid, although angry, was trembling all over and tried to hide it by clenching his fists. Perhaps he is scared by the fear of being abandoned again and needs time to believe his words. After thinking about it a little, Sian decided to propose something that would suit both brothers perfectly. She will take care of Ashid so he recovers a bit, and in 2 weeks they will meet Ted again. The knight didn't like the idea. He didn't understand how a little girl could take care of his little brother. Moreover, Ashid is his brother, and he won't hand him over, while Sian insisted on giving the boy time to reflect. To avoid arguments, she proposed that the boy decide who to go with. For a minute, the boy stared at the floor before deciding to stay with Sian. Ted couldn't hold his brother by force and hoped that in time he would forgive him and accept him. The lady asked the knight to take good care of Ashid, and if he managed to convince the boy to return to his brother, Ted would be her knight forever. The girl clarified that she would take care of him, not for that reason. He was just a child who needed attention. Then she asked the knight to meet her in 2 weeks. He accepted and assured her that he would never forget the kindness he received that day. As they walked away, Sian hoped the brothers would reconcile. Moreover, she had managed to gain some trust from Ted. Now, to prepare against Axel's threats and attacks, she could build an effective fortress. Also, she now had a grateful little friend whom she still had to raise. Thinking about it, Sian suddenly felt a pang of guilt for her hidden motives. But anyway, she would take care of that boy who had been given many difficulties in life at such a young age. The girl sincerely wished that Ashid would live happily on a path covered with flowers. She was very happy to see that instead of a grim and angry face, the boy showed a wide smile. But that's not all. The maids also suddenly shed tears upon hearing the boy's happy laughter. The first thing Sian planned to do upon arriving at the palace was to fix up her new friend. Meanwhile, Duke Matthias was interrogating the criminals who had been captured in the home forest. The one-eyed man suddenly became interested in what the man with the top knot had done to them. But the scandal annoyed the Duke, and he ordered the guard knight to take care of that insignificance. He himself wanted to tear the skin off that scoundrel who dared to call his daughter a demon. She is the most delicate creature who wouldn't hurt even a fly, a precious creature full of love. A mountain of troubles suddenly fell upon Duke Matthias's head, as even Delphi is involved in this chaos. He will have to face 3 beasts, Delphi, Axel, and the Senate, not to mention the imperial family. And the Pope tied to imperial power. They must be destroyed. But one false step, and everything will be over. Matthias planned to avenge Yawela's death on these beings. And first of all, he will get rid of Duchess Delphi. She is a powerful mage, but she is not immune. The problem is Axel. Matthias hasn't found the right way to get rid of them yet, but he will surely think of something. However, time was pressing, and at that moment, the Duke heard the voice of his beloved daughter. His gloomy thoughts vanished in an instant, and his face lit up with a happy smile upon seeing his little one. This time she didn't jump directly into his arms, but asked to greet someone. She showed him a small boy, already washed and well-dressed. But Matthias was still surprised, not understanding how the boy had arrived or who he really was. Sian introduced Ashid as her adorable little helper. Under other circumstances, the Duke might have reacted differently, but now he had many worries. And this appeared, his daughter's happy expression, who wouldn't let Ashid move a step away, prevented him from abruptly refusing. And because of her joy, the Duke couldn't openly show distrust, deciding to allow the boy to live in dependency for now. Sian and Ashid even gently convinced him, saying she would give him a separate room where he could stay. It's impossible to describe how happy the girl was that Dad allowed her to keep her friend, as if he were a pet. While Matthias hid his doubts about this boy, Sian kept looking at the baby as if he were her favorite toy. The Duke already had enough worries with that other masked boy, Leonard. Ashid, not knowing how to thank her, promised to become the most useful person to them. Sian, in her thoughts, hoped that he could overcome that here too they would end up abandoning him. Matthias was also lost in emotion. It hurt him to see how his daughter's face showed loneliness again. To distract her a little, he proposed that they all go eat, and by the way asked what else had happened to Sian. The girl admitted that she had saved a knight, but her father, who for her was always the only knight, didn't understand what she meant. Before she called him the White Horse Knight, but now she was talking about a real knight. Teasingly, Macias pretended to be offended because, according to his daughter, he was not a real knight. That always made her react that way. And then with a bunny face, she would say it was a joke. But now it didn't work. Matthias was stunned. His daughter not only ignored him, but also proposed that Sid play hunting. Since the boy is new, he needs to be trained in a game called Goblin House. Right after dinner, the children planned to catch a goblin and kill it. The Duke, with some sadness in his heart, understood that his sweet daughter had grown up and changed, but the most important thing is that she is fine. The real problem here is the Merman family, and to fully investigate what is happening to Sian, the Duke will first find out who that knight is. Later, after a hearty dinner, the children went out to the garden, where they were going to start the Goblin House. However, the garden was empty, although the girl had asked her father's subordinates to release those monsters nearby. The maids appeared right in front of her nose, explaining that there were problems with the Goblin House. The girl opened her mouth in surprise, not understanding what could have gone wrong. It turns out that the goblins captured in the forest, Lord Matthias ordered them all to be eliminated. He stated that keeping such a thing in the palace was unacceptable. Sian understood that Dad simply felt sorry for the goblins, as his heart is too sensitive. And with a heart as good as his, surviving in a house full of villains, it won't be easy at all. The maid offered the boy an adorable kitten, which the father acquired for her instead of the goblins. Sian barely saw the small, fluffy white animal. She immediately fell in love. On the other hand, the cat is completely useless for developing strength, since she is a girl who will be a great villain. She needs goblins, lions, tigers, and things like that, but there she noticed the charming Ashid. The boy was petrified with astonishment. He had never seen a white cat and considered it very beautiful. Sean understood, since in the alley only dirty cats live, and it is not surprising that he sees a white cat for the first time. However, judging by his long trance, this animal suits him very well. In that case, the girl decided to do without goblins and sat with Ashid and the cat on the bench. The maids didn't stray far, although they used every free minute to train their muscles. The boy suddenly became sad, as he has no name, being a homeless street child. But it is understandable that, out of resentment towards Ted, he doesn't want to use the name Ashid either. The boy really hated his older brother. He still believed he had abandoned him. However, Sian wasn't sure. But it was difficult for her to explain it from another perspective. And she asked Ashid to give the Holy Knight a chance to explain everything. But understanding that he was just a child, the girl didn't demand that he do something he didn't want to do. She could wait a little. Ashid was even more surprised. He thought they had brought him precisely to give Ted a chance to defend himself. In reality, Sian pitied him. He was covered in scars from being abandoned. And in this child, she saw herself before meeting her dad. That's why she couldn't look away and wanted to show him how much good there is in the world, so that Ashid would be happy and smile like she smiled when she met a wonderful dad. Sian sincerely wished for her friend's happiness, and it seemed that in her life, she was the only person with such a desire. The boy couldn't believe something like this was happening to him, and it seemed to him that everything was just a dream. A tear rolled down his cheek from the emotions that flooded him, and Sian was surprised. She didn't want him to cry. To entertain him a little, she proposed playing a strength game that always lifted his spirits. Although you can even play something scary, as long as it distracts him from sad thoughts. During that time, Sian also became fond of Ashid, who was willing to play anything with her. Soon both were having fun throwing small water-filled balls at each other. Duke Matthias saw them playing as he passed by the window, and understood that his daughter probably wasn't really interested in a goblin. She is probably just curious and wants to see him again, just as a servant arrived to the Duke with a report. The spy he sent to the Holy Knight was neutralized instantly. This means that Knight Ted is incredibly strong. As soon as Matthias learned about that man from Sian, he sent an assassin after him, because he could bewitch the girl. But it seems that the real knight Sian chose truly possesses exceptional abilities. Immediately after, the servant handed the Duke a letter that Ted had asked to be delivered to him. In it, it was mentioned that the knight understood where the assassin came from, as it was very obvious. The Holy Knight also begged not to hold a grudge for having eliminated that assassin. Moreover, Ted never intended to harm Lady Cyanmermuth, and on the contrary, he wishes to be useful. The knight confirmed his words with an oath before God to demonstrate that he is absolutely sincere. Below were the sworn knightly truth and the knightly oath of the daughter of the notoriously known villain family Mermot. Matthias was intrigued how Ted could recognize the assassin when he was being secretly watched. Although the letter was masterfully writ, the servant also reported that this knight is well specialized in holy strength and is incredibly talented. The strength of the House of Mermond, based on darkness, was naturally vulnerable to holy power. To face Axel Mermond, a person of immense strength was needed, and that turned out to be Knight Ted. But Matthias is sure that his daughter knows nothing, for she must grow up like the sunlight, pure and immaculate. Before the Duke knew it, rumors were already spreading that Duchess Delphia was returning, and he ordered her to be attacked immediately upon arrival, while Sian should not go out on the street. Still kneeling, the servant promised to do his best. As soon as he finished, Sian, who was bored, entered and asked to go see the gnome. But at that moment she froze, as the scene she saw seemed very significant, and the father blushed violently, as if he had been caught doing something inappropriate. Breaking the silence, the girl demanded an explanation as to why that uncle was kneeling, and he feared that his daughter had discovered his true nature. Suddenly, Sian revealed that that uncle was asking Dad to buy potatoes. The Duke breathed a sigh of relief and immediately added that she was right, except they weren't potatoes, but sweet potatoes. But the girl noticed Dad's expression, the same one he makes when buying something clearly overpriced, and immediately demanded that the servant say how much he was asking for the sweet potatoes. But he couldn't utter a word, because he saw Sian's tenderness and fell in love with her instantly. Although the girl was angry and demanded he admit he was scared of her, because unlike Dad, she is very velvety, and Matthias understood that his daughter likes to be called that. It is now clear how much this family influences Sian, and she kept questioning the price of the sweet potato. The subordinate hesitated, not knowing how to answer correctly. The Duke gave him an almost imperceptible signal to guess and tell the truth. Then, the man declared that he was asking for 1 silver coin for 100 units, thinking that Sian didn't know the real price. But the girl told her dad that the guy was a complete idiot, since normally 1 coin is given for 10 units. Perhaps that's why the uncle looks so desperate, and Sian proposed buying the sweet potato from him at the fair price. Matthias agreed, happy that his daughter suspected nothing, and suddenly she started asking why he needed sweet potatoes. While the Duke was thinking about how to answer appropriately, the girl again gave the correct answer, believing that her dad also wanted to get stronger. The maids also only eat sweet potatoes and chicken breast to gain muscle, and probably Dad wants to be just as strong. Confirming her suspicions, Matthias asked his daughter to change her wet clothes, and then they would eat a delicious dessert. While they were talking, the servant decided to sneak out of the office, and Matthias, while holding his daughter in his arms, felt a deep peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. And taking advantage of the moment, he asked Sian that if she approached a woman named Delphina, she should run away immediately because she was very dangerous, and the Duke hoped the girl would obey his instructions. He planned to get rid of those scoundrels before Sian was in danger, but he still warned her. However, the girl was not afraid and was ready to confront them, when suddenly an argument was heard on the street. Sian became anxious, and the Duke wanted to close the window so that no one would interrupt their conversation. But the little one had already jumped from his hands, and apologizing, explained that she had to leave due to urgent matters. Her father felt a little hurt, although he didn't try to stop his daughter. He only wanted to know who dared to interrupt that rare moment when they were alone. It turned out that 2 boys, Leonardo and Ashid, had met and seemed to have a disagreement. Sian recognized their voices and hurried so much that the maids worried about her. But what surprised them more was how she could run so fast with her little legs. The girl completely ignored their words and hurried to find out what was happening outside. The voices of Leonardo and Ashid indicated that they were arguing, so Sian had to leave her father without clarifying anything, although she wanted to stay with him. Probably that would hurt Dad, but the girl had no other option. They cannot lose sight of these children if she and the Duke want to survive in this world. From afar, Sian noticed a tense atmosphere over her friends and immediately shouted at them to stop. The boys immediately focused on the young lady with a frightened face and thought something had happened. Before answering, the girl needed to catch her breath and then started asking them why they were going to fight. Meanwhile, Ashid held his friend so she wouldn't fall due to lack of breath, and accidentally held her hand. The moment became even tenser when Leonard saw it and became visibly angry, and immediately demanded that Sian explain what it meant. Naturally, the girl was indignant, although she shouldn't have expected anything else from the adopted son of the villain family. But Ashid doesn't know the whole story and might have misinterpreted the situation, thinking that Leonardo was interrogating him. That reflected the threatening mask and the brusque tone. Sian felt sad, as they were both her friends and she sincerely wished they would become friends. To clarify the situation, she introduced her little friend who would live in her house. They would see each other frequently, so Leonardo had to get along with him, although he didn't understand why it was necessary. Even after all the explanations, Leonardo still seemed angry. Suddenly, he asked even more angrily who that dwarf was to Sian if he was her friend. The girl, with the same smile, assured him that Leonardo was also her friend and that she had no intention of moving away from him. It seems it worked. The masked boy started to calm down, but affirmed that he would do his best to become her best friend and surpass the one who now accompanies her. His gaze overflowed with possessiveness, and Sian confirmed that Leonardo had really been objecting to Ashid. On the other hand, she was very happy that the future villain had promised to be her friend, and then Ashid also promised that he would do his best to be a good friend. Magnificent! Sian is slowly gaining more allies. Her strength increases, although it is still insufficient. But now, to strengthen their friendship, the girl proposed that they all go eat something delicious together. She was happy that the dispute between the boys was almost resolved. Then she gave some orders to the maids. She was interrupted in this activity by her father's voice, who decided to check on his daughter, since he had seen everything through the window. And the little one softened instantly upon seeing her dear dad, and as always ran to hug him. The Duke picked her up as she approached him, and, setting her on his hands, remembered that they had agreed to eat sweets together. But she stated that she was a little busy now. She had already planned to have dessert with her friends. Then Matthias adopted the offended expression again, adding that he would feel very lonely eating alone. Dad's sad face always acted devastatingly. The girl understood that lately she had spent almost no time with him and didn't want to sadden him. The only thing left was to change plans, and, apologizing to her friends, she explained that she would have to postpone the snack with them. Moreover, the boys had reconciled, and now Sian wasn't afraid to leave them alone, saying goodbye sweetly to them. As the father carried her, he asked them, just in case, not to fight. Leonardo reflected later on what had happened, and understood that his reaction was very similar to jealousy. Perhaps because he believed that only he should be next to the brown-haired boy. That's why he got angry. Although seeing how another boy clung to Sian, something really moved inside Leonardo. But the most important thing is that they now have a common enemy, and it's not the time to think about that boy. He explained to Ashid that Lord Matthias Mermond, the strongest in these lands, had just arrived, and he normally doesn't pay a shred of attention to children, but Ashid noticed how warmly he looked at Sian. Then, Leonardo affirmed that it wasn't like that, and that in reality, that man was threatening Sian, something she herself acknowledged, and for the sake of her friends, she is now going to the very hell, just so that Duke Matthias doesn't make the boys his prey. Since Ashit would stay in this house, Leonardo advised him to protect Sian. Hope shone in the boy's eyes. Now he could be useful and repay Sian's kindness, and he agreed to protect her. And Leonardo looked a bit critical. It seemed he had something malicious in mind. The next day, at the Mermond Mansion, another equally important event occurred. Delphin Mermond was returning to his place of origin. It had been a long time since he had set foot on those lands, but he didn't return by chance, but to execute his evil plan. The servants welcomed him inside and immediately offered to fill his bath. But Delphin got angry because his servants should first ask about the soldiers' training and inspections. Then he went to the room with the monster figures. He always liked to look at them. The white tiger figure was especially beautiful. The Duchess always paid special attention to it. She had that hobby, turning the monsters she liked into figures and exhibiting them. After enjoying looking at the figures, Delphin asked if the maid had gathered information about Sian Mermond. She needed to know which family members had contacted that child. They were the children of the vassals and Duchess Ruquella. The rest of the children didn't matter to her. Only one caught her attention, Leonardo. That boy had great potential, but still wasn't as strong as the Duchess. More interesting was that he had met with Ruquella, although Delphin didn't know what united them. They probably had a cold relationship, since Ruquella didn't like children, nor was she attached to Matthias. After thinking for a while, Delphia decided to visit the Duchess personally. She didn't even want to shower and hurried, as she couldn't contain her curiosity. Meanwhile, Ruquella in her garden was arranging flowers in a vase, which she herself had picked. Suddenly, an unwanted guest appeared, although the Duchess was not at all surprised by her arrival. Delphia didn't understand why her mother showed so much hostility if they weren't strangers. She also noticed that she was practicing ikebana, but for some reason, she used poisonous flowers. As always, Ruquella seemed to her a strange and dangerous old woman living in a house with Mo. But Ruquella preferred living quietly here than in the jungle hunting monsters. And unwilling to waste time on frivolities with her adopted daughter, she directly asked her to get to the point. Before answering, Delphia made herself comfortable at the table and confessed that she had come for Sian, the son that Duke Matthias had brought. For her, it was a little entertainment that could become Matthias's weakness. As soon as Ruquella heard her granddaughter's name, she broke one of the petals and threw it on the table. Delphia understood that the old Duchess's reaction was quite restless and seemed like a challenge to a duel, or a death threat. Throwing a poisonous plant is a peculiar duel challenge, something like when knights throw their sword. Ruquella just hissed with barely contained fury, warning Delphia not to dare touch that child. She didn't understand what had happened to the Duchess, as she had gotten angry over a small child. It was known to everyone that Ruquella Mermond hated children and always got agitated when she was near them. But now she has a strange reaction. It seems that Sian Mermond really managed to charm a cold woman. And not wanting to talk to Delphia anymore, the Duchess demanded that she leave, because she didn't want that dirty dust to stay in her house for even a minute. But the young lady hadn't finished her task yet, and she became interested if that girl was really Matthias's daughter. After all, it may be that her father is not the Duke, and if she is not the legitimate daughter of the family, then there is no reason to defend her so fervently. Ruquella remained silent, but her gaze still expressed fierce anger. Then she touched that flower she had thrown in front of Delphia and used magic. A strange smell began to emanate from it, and the young woman first felt mild nausea. But then she could no longer breathe the air near that plant. Delphia clearly perceived the smell of poison, and Ruquella reminded her to leave. And this time she wouldn't ask again. Surrounded by a toxic and foul smell, the young woman now wanted to leave that place as soon as possible. As she left, she understood that her mother's character hadn't changed. If she had stayed there, she wouldn't have survived. The scent of the flower was also a warning. That meant that Duchess Ruquella really cherished Sian Mermond. That child managed to tame a harpy. As time went by, Delphi became increasingly intrigued. She herself had never been interested in children, but she was sure that there was something special about that boy. Now, Delphi felt something strange and exciting, which she hadn't experienced in a long time. On the way, she asked one of the maids, where was Sian Mermond now? The girl should be in the Melon Children's Academy Joy Group. At such names, the malicious Duchess thought it would be even more fun to play now. Meanwhile, at the academy, Sian was mentally getting angry, not understanding why she had to attend classes, especially since the current class was about how to be a good child disguised as happiness. It seemed to her that she had been tricked, as she clearly remembered that she was going to eat tonkatsu with her dad. She ended up with him in a class for good children, in a course with the strange name of Joy. The teacher, after the theory, asked everyone to close their eyes and meditate, following a specific breathing system. He explained that every person is beautiful in their own way, and that in that course, they would learn to love others. Sian considered it nonsense. After all, humanity is evil, and she herself is at the top. But her father, the fatal obstacle on the path to becoming the great villain, addressed her. He also advised helping those in distress. It seems he is becoming kinder. Matthias meets friends, shares his things, takes care of the wounded, and surrounds everyone with love and warmth, and he hopes that Sian also grows up very kind. Matthias became heir. Therefore, he must now be above all the villains of the Mermond family. So he cannot see the world through rose-colored glasses, but his current state showed that he was too kind. And if it continues like this, Sian fears that she herself will become infected with kindness. She was happy to have Ashid and Leonard nearby, although they are still small and almost useless. Looking back at the bench where they were sitting, the girl noticed that they had slept through the class. They were probably busy with something last night, but Sian decided not to worry about that for now. What worried her most was that if Dad kept turning into a son character, everyone would meet the end. The boys really didn't stay up late last night after Sian left. And they talked. Leonard gave instructions, stating that Ashid is too weak, so he will only temporarily protect Sian. He must obey him and turn to Leonard if something happens, because only he can protect her. Ashid had no objection, not even when he discovered that Sian was going to a dangerous place. He couldn't do anything. Now he truly believed he was incapable of anything. He wanted to protect Sian, but he was just a weak street boy without the strength that Tedda had. Maybe he should develop his physical strength to be as strong as the maids. But at that moment, Ashid remembered that divine strength is inherited. Perhaps he also had potential, although it usually manifests at an early age, and since he hadn't had any so far, the chances were slim. The boy even thought about meeting Tedda, but he was that man who abandoned him one day. But Ashid wanted to become stronger, and if necessary, he was willing to ask Knight Tedda for help. And now he fell asleep in class at the academy because he had thought a lot the day before. Then he heard the teacher say that it wasn't necessary to be strong. Even weakness has its own beauty. The boy didn't understand how weakness could be beautiful, but then he looked at Sian, who at that moment had also turned and was watching him attentively. And the boy promised himself that he would become strong, even stronger than Matthias. He would protect Lady Sian from any threat that might face her. After class, the teacher moved to the next part, and outdoors proposed trying vegetarian dishes. But for now, the children had a little time to rest. Until the food arrived, Sian saw an opportunity and grabbing her friends by the hand, she dragged them with her. She asked her father to wait with the food. Now she needed a moment for those boys. Although she couldn't take him with her, she promised him that they would return in a maximum of 10 minutes. She took the boys to the backyard, where she fell silent for a few seconds, thinking how to start the conversation. The boys even worried, thinking their friend was sick. But then she calmly stood up and declared proudly and firmly that from that moment on she would take charge of reforming her father. Since her father had taken her to those courses, Sian had to make sure he became a real villain. She invited her friends because she expected their help. Leonard was surprised by her determination, and both boys understood that the Duke needed to be reformed, since he had become too kind. Although Sian meant that her father should become a villain, and for that she would do everything possible, the boys enthusiastically agreed to help her, and Leonard was the first to ask what he should do. As soon as Sian opened her mouth to explain, Ashton affirmed that he also wanted to help her. He hoped that she would manage to develop divine power and be able to use it. The boy wasn't sure if he possessed such strength, but he wanted to find out. Sian was happy, since this will not only help, but is also a step towards Ashton agreeing to meet Teddy. After agreeing on a slightly strange plan, the girl proposed sealing it by slapping palms. She clarified to the boys that it was a promise that they would work together on a father reformation project. Afterwards, they could return to the clearing with the others. Besides, the three of them were hungry now. Suddenly, Leonard looked suspiciously somewhere, and he quietly commented to Sean that he felt a disturbing energy nearby. The children heard a crackle in the branch, and when they turned around, they saw a huge one there, and a terrifying crow with a single eye, like a cyclops.